Bonjour there.
You've got to get a hold of yourself.
PSYOP is a critical element to the overall RSOF mission. RSOF's main mission being unconventional warfare. It's very hard to have a resistance movement without that propaganda call coming out and recruiting that G-force to come in and train with you. So it's the critical first step in information warfare before you get to any type of decisive action. And we're seeing the same thing in multi-domain operations and near-peer threats, that information warfare comes first before actual warfare.
So the easiest way for me to describe psychological operations and what I do on the tactical side is trying to get a desired effect from either an enemy force or from a friendly force that is going to help us achieve kinetic effects using non-kinetic means.
And that behavior change takes place through a matter of weeks, months, years, typically. It's a usually mid to long-term process, and the techniques we use to influence that population range across a very broad spectrum. Some of those are your standard, media or mixed media type of products. It may be paper, it may be face-to-face engagement, it may be radio broadcasts, looking for cultural change or social change, specifically volatile areas of the world that we work in.
And that behavior change takes place through a matter of weeks, months, years, typically. It's a usually mid to long-term process, and the techniques we use to influence that population range across a very broad spectrum. Some of those are your standard, media or mixed media type of products. There may be paper, may be face-to-face engagement, there may be radio broadcasts. Looking for cultural change or social change, the specifically volatile areas in the world that we work in.
Hello, hello.
Sorry, guys.
Looks like we are live.
Last minute preparations here.
It's all good, man.
All right. I am not I'm a Luddite.
No way.
Yeah, I got the red. I got the red and the blue. So I'm trying to hide my ugliness. Trying to make myself. But how are you? How are you all doing?
We're doing good, yeah. Just spent some nice time out on the lake on a paddleboard and enjoyed myself, yeah.
Right on. Derek, he's burning the midnight oil as usual.
Yeah. My third, it's like the fourth video I've kind of done or participated in today.
Yeah, oh my gosh. How was your Europa natural law?
Yeah, Europa natural law. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
You had a pretty good turnout for that, it seems like.
Yeah, it's been going pretty good. And it's, the old continent and folks just, getting down with that good old natty law and how it relates to them and their environment and understanding their perspectives through their, language, articulation, accents, which is cool. And yeah.
I think it's a great project of people who really care, and are doing the work, and it's awesome. Yeah.
Derek is definitely doing the work. He's putting it together.
Yeah.
So is Leslie. I caught your stream the other day on the zombie archetype and the zombie, which was I tuned in a little bit late, but I enjoyed it. It was
Good. Really cool to see you in
well
there. At
done.
the time, I didn't realize it was you. And then I realized, oh, that was Adam.
Well, I had to change my I had to put my last name on one of my Facebook accounts because I'm trying to connect with some of my European relatives because I'm planning the trip over there. And hopefully, I'll get to see Derek when I fly to Europe. I think it's gonna be July of next year.
Yeah.
So a lot of my relatives in Lithuania and abroad, which is where I'm going, they don't recognize Adam Alexander so much. So I put the last name on there so they can know who I am when I try to friend them
Yeah.
up.
Makes sense, sure. And that zombie show, just for people to know, it was on Chris Jansen's End Evil podcast, which he has every Thursday evening, 6 p.m. Pacific. Yeah, he's got a lot of
Chris,
good shows.
I know Chris. I met him back in Autonomy, and he's a solid dude. Always has been, stand-up guy.
Yeah.
And he's been plugging away at his project. Well, at least that project for a long time.
Yeah,
He's put
it's
the work
adding
in
up.
there. So glad to see.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're being
eventually,
consistent.
absolutely, and the messaging is, I think, pretty relevant for the current times. So I think you're
Yeah.
going to start seeing more people kind of tune in and drop out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're glad you got here with us again, Adam, to do our part 2 on psychological operations. Yeah, I know you've been
Yeah.
preparing.
Well, we had
Oh yeah.
a whole bunch of like I said before, it's a topic that is it fills you know it covers so much. It's so broad and expansive, and so last time we had a bunch of topics that we didn't really move into, and that's kind of where I'm going to return. I have some newer topics that I've tried to bring into the fray, but I think there were a couple key areas that we didn't get to touch on last time. So
Yeah, sure. If you wanted to bring it back, come rewind, if you will, if you're so inclined, and if not, no
review,
worries. But if anything comes
absolutely.
to mind.
So like I said before, this topic's so huge, and I'm getting older, and my memory is still decent, but I am going to reference my notes, so just hopefully that doesn't bother anybody. And I was planning on doing a short review over some of the basic concepts and the terminology initially, and then we can take it from there. I had some of those case studies that I was trying to display how PSYOP is actually used in real time. So that way it gives people a better idea. Try to do a PSYOP analysis of some of the case studies or some of the events from history that people would recognize. We covered, I think, Flat Earth, QAnon last time. I think we cover 9/11, I believe. And I know Leslie asked me about the the connection between PSYOP and propaganda and the healthcare, mental health, and which is I don't think I got to that last time, but that's a really interesting topic because I pulled a lot from like the Soviet Union and how they weaponized mental health to create political prisoners. That's kind of where I went with that. And I think Derek, we were talking about the topic of diet and veganism, and kind of how I kind of approach that. I try to approach all these case studies and topics from a very analytical, non-connected, like a very, I'm not trying to present my opinion. I'm trying to present it in like an analysis. So from the standpoint of that, with the diet topic, I dove into kind of what we've seen with the introduction and the promotion of lab-grown meats, of the insect protein, and kind of went into how that's being used. How the history of diet was, since time immemorial, was used to subjugate people. And like I told you, Derek, like I'm all for liberty and freedom when it comes to personal diet choices. Do what you do what you works best for you. And I kind of was looking at it. I've seen it become a very divisive issue, just like everything else. And when I start to see that, when I start to see the when I start to see I posted I created a post on my PSYOP group, Minds Under Influence, kind of looking at the polarity. I brought in some hermetic principles of polarity and the Hegelian dialectic, and the idea that when you see, nature kind of happens on a spectrum. There's no, it's not this or that necessarily. I mean, there's polarity, there's opposites, but whenever you see a topic or some sort of subject being presented to the masses in a very polarized way, that's where you generally want to look, because somebody's behind that. Because that's kind of you're the people that know how to control the masses. They're presenting two predetermined, um, you know, uh, polarities. So you have one end of the spectrum, and that's a way to basically control the narrative, control, the dialogue, the debate, and and whenever you see that, just like when we talked about flat Earth, it's you're either this or that, and it's like when I see something like that, and I see that very polarized groups of people, and clearly it's creating tension and animosity between people who do or don't. That's psyop all over it. That's propaganda all over it. So it's very easy to kind of look at these topics, and so anyway, that was a little bit of a preview of kind of where I'm at. I have some really good quotes, historical quotes that illustrate psyop and propaganda. Quotes, people really connect with quotes because they're familiar oftentimes. So then I have some of the books that I wanted to get to that are for people to check out, some of the key literature on psyop and propaganda, and I got some synopsis on them. So that's kind of what I had.
That sounds awesome. Yeah. One takeaway for me last time was in this study was recognizing that there are methods of manipulation, right? There's psychological like trickery going on, that's what we want to look for. And it's not about picking a side, right? It's really about looking for this psychological trickery and recognizing that there's probably truth in both sides.
Yep.
It's, just because something is being considered a psyop, it doesn't mean that all of the information is false, right? It's more about looking about how that information is being manipulated to bring divisiveness between people, basically.
Absolutely.
Or to steer people in a certain direction
Absolutely.
for an outcome.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's
And the
a
outcome
psyop tactic or strategy.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
And what is the outcome? Often it's not even about the topic necessarily, but like why would these social engineers do these psyops?
They control the narrative, and they control like I was saying before, they control the spectrum. So they like you said, you answered it in your question where you're talking about they steer people. It's to steer people in a certain direction, and they determine there's something called the Overton window, and there's a accepted. Basically, they want to control the dialogue for any given topic, and if you set up if you're setting up a field of play, like say a soccer field or football field, you have you're out there painting the lines, and you're painting one end of the spectrum, and that's basically controlling the area of play. So that's what that is. So whenever you see a very divisive, polarizing topic, I mean, these things, like, everything in life, there's a spectrum to nature and a spectrum to reality. It's not this or that. It's not black and white, but there's so much gray area. So in forcing people into the left or right, the red or blue, it's like whatever's in between, they can control that. And that goes back to the Hegelian dialectic, to where, generally speaking, if you control the parameters or the field of play, and then generally you're going to design that field of play because you want a specific outcome. So synthesis, antithesis, so on, and there's generally speaking, a desired reaction that they want, the powers that be, or whoever's behind the particular propaganda. And propaganda, we're talking about different levels here. We're talking about, or PSYOP, we're talking about, and it's coming from it's coming from marketing, it's coming from advertising, it's coming from political entities, it's coming from military intelligence agencies, it's coming from elites, the regime, people call it the regime that you're talking about. There's, with the private public sector combination, people are familiar with Rand Corporation, and people are familiar with, some of these organizations, they, you have this the tactic or the method of influence. It's coming from so many different angles. And when we're talking about political discourse, the powers that be, they want to control that. They don't want you stepping out. So that's what I was saying last time. You have the left perspective, the right perspective. There's really no anymore. You could tell it's everything's so polarized. There's no room for any, more sort of, in between. There's no gray area perspective. It's like you either got to be this or that. Like with flat Earth, it's like you're stupid if you don't believe it. You're stupid if you do. And it's like my perspective was, it's like, how, I'm always just dealing with what's right in front of me. Like I'm more concerned with, my daily life and how do I impact and influence people in a positive way. How do I, it's like I get it. People like to sort of, I look at that very particular topic and I'm like, that's PSYOP and propaganda. Like it's so embedded in that. And it's like, there's 100% people behind that, pushing that, promoting that, especially on social media. Oh, I forgot. I had a case study on the mimetic warfare. I hope I got that. Yeah, here it is. Meme warfare. And this is kind of what we're talking about. And Derek and I have talked about how memes, are used. And I was, if we look back to the Soviet, let's just say the Soviet propaganda, we think about the posters, promoting communism. That's a meme. Even in ancient times, you had, on the walls and say, any ancient society, they would create imagery. They would use imagery and script. So hearts and minds, like we talked about before. A lot of, we don't know if we're seeing maybe something that was used to influence people. So meme warfare is very prevalent. We see it, like Derek and I were talking about how, in fact, he covered this, or he touched on this with the zombie stream with Chris and you and some of the other folks. And he was talking about the act of creation, creating and putting, being responsible for, being conscientious about the words and the imagery, because everything's symbolic, and that's propagandists and PSYOP, we're dealing with symbols. We're dealing with archetypal symbols. We're dealing with everything symbolic, and everything, can be used in a symbolic way to influence people, because these symbols, these archetypal symbols, are very ingrained in our psyche. This is why I was, studying Jung quite a bit and gotten, very interested in his work and learning about that area, because that's what we're dealing with, really. We're dealing with influencing the hearts and minds, and what better way to do that than with symbols and script? And, letters are symbols, and it's ancient. It's been around. Some of the symbols we see, we try to interpret, but they could have been like propaganda or PSYOP back then, So yeah, be very conscientious about the messaging and the imagery and the symbols. They have impacts. They have impacts in the words you use. Right. And I very much have been moving into being more, as I get older and more, I guess, aware or wise, just how important words, symbols, and all these things.
Well, it goes to the subconscious, right? It hits the subconscious. Yeah. So if you're not aware of what buttons are getting pushed, then people are more likely to be reactive emotionally.
An automatic reaction.
Yeah. And then people become less united, less able to solve problems, there's less harmony and unity.
Master propagandist, PSYOP people, marketing. Like I said, propaganda and marketing are two sides of the same coin. they somebody was I had read somewhere, somebody was, there's a level, there's a behavior of people to read too much into things, because people are just, there's so much like manipulation. It's that becomes, everything's a conspiracy, everything's a psyop, and it's not. Again, everything falls on a spectrum. It's not this or that. Some things, there's many things that are. And kind of what I was trying to do with this talk was, once you can, like you said, Leslie, earlier, once you give a clear, these tactics, psyop tactics, propaganda tactics, and methods, they have names, they have titles, they have explanations. It's kind of like we talked about before with the fallacy. Once you study what fallacy is and all the different types of fallacy, you can spot a lie or just, an untruth pretty easily. But you have to be aware, like Derek's been getting into, gourmet chef. A lot of us, in order to create a recipe, you have to know what the ingredients are. Then you got to know the methods, and that's the same with psyop or propaganda. Once you figure out, and it's limited. There's a limited amount, but just being aware that these things have titles, like false flag, that's a method that, like, somebody named that, or limited hangout, or polarization. It's like people have put names to these tactics, and once you know what those are, it's pretty easy to see. But the big thing with propaganda or psyop is just whenever you see a polarization taken shape, like it's this or that, you should most likely sense that, or at least have the idea that there's something going on there. Somebody's behind that, kind of pushing people in either one of the either directions, and then they control the whole thing. So
Yeah, so they can, their creation and their centralization, or this the sensation of it all, and
hearts and minds,
yeah. Oh man, I forgot where I was gonna go with
thought
that.
and emotion.
Yeah,
You were kind of
so
touching on that when
the
with that zombie.
weaponization of words. Sorry, yeah,
Yep.
what you mentioned of, like, words exist, prior to, a lot of psyops, but the weaponization of, some of these words and the polarization of them. Yeah, it's
Changing the meanings,
yeah, that's what I wanted to throw in there.
changing
That's
the
very
meanings of words, the interpretation. That's all manipulation. Yeah, absolutely. And to where we're at a point now where it's like, it's hard to make heads or tails of anything, and that's kind of where they want people. I think that's what I've been sort of alarmed about. It's the idea that nothing has meaning, nothing has truth, everything's subjective. There's no objectivity, and when I see that, I'm like, yeah, there's manipulation here, big time.
So how can we spot this better? I guess, how can we get our, folk, those,
Sharpen our
really,
radar. Yeah.
yeah, right, yeah, the
you
radar.
have to I actually have, I'm going to go over those listed terms again, the 50 most, well, it's 50 terms commonly used in context of psyops and propaganda. Just like if you're learning about fallacy or natural law, like natural law is a series of principles, right? Once you learn, there's just more to it than that, but like there's a set of principles, and once you learn those principles, whether it be hermetic principles or natural, like the sort of Egyptian Neteru based natural law principles, once you're aware of those, you have a certain way to approach, just your daily sort of reality. And for with PSYOP, with anything, it's like I said with Rich Grove and the autonomy program, he always pushed the idea of the trivium. So you have the grammar, rhetoric, and logic. So it's the true scientific method is that it's a methodology. It's not a noun. Science isn't a noun. It's a verb. So it's a act. So with anything, you can apply that to learning anything. You got to learn the grammar first. So you got to learn the terminology. Like first, being aware that there's methods that are defined. There's terms that are defined. There's and really, if you want to study this topic and be able to sort of detect the manipulation, then you have to be familiar with some of these terms, and you got to put some time and effort into it. If you don't want, if you understand coming from me, and I'm telling you that yes, these tactics, methods, techniques, they have names, and they were given names, and they have very particular meanings. And once you're sort of become aware of those things, and it's not a lot to, I mean, really at the end of the day, we're just talking about inversion and manipulation. I mean, you got truth, and you got you have the inversion of truth, and you have, like you were saying with the putting the head of the five-sided star into the ground. It's like it's an inversion. There's a spectrum there, but it's just degrees of the same thing. It's not that, it's like the only way this operates is through manipulation. It's just, so it's not rocket science. It's very simple. It's just becoming aware, just understanding that manipulation is just an inversion of truth, and there's a million different ways to do that, but it's all the same. It's just degrees of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
So
fascinating.
anyway,
I would love maybe to have an attachment or a link to that handout with those 50
I will
manipulations, we could attach it.
I will absolutely, and I'll put I could put all that. I could send it to you guys. I'll get this all together and I'll send it to you, or I'll post it. I created the group. Well, Derek and I were talking about this a while. No, I think 2 years ago. Bringing the nomenclature of PSYOP, and
Yeah.
Between Derek's 50 projects an hour and my busy life, it just never happened. So, but I
Yeah,
built
I'd like to bring it into my work a little bit more too. So
I
that's a
would be
handy
happy
list.
to get this
Yeah,
all together for you, and I'll get it nice and neat and ship it
that'd be
on
great.
over. It's all just my
Yeah.
study of, putting these notes together for this stream. Actually, I built that Facebook group really just for this, for you, for this stream. So I'll be
That's
putting things in
awesome.
there. I can drop all that. So anyway,
Oh,
I'm done
live. Yeah.
ranting. So
Go ahead and bring up some examples and then, maybe fold in the names of the psyops as you're talking so we can integrate it.
all right, so that is something I am going to do with the case studies, but I'm going to go over the outline to just give a refresher of the basic PSYOP tech, an overview of PSYOP propaganda, and then I want to go back over the terms like we were talking about, the grammar,
Great.
and then once we familiarize people with the grammar, then it's a matter of the logic, so kind of putting it together. So once you get the vocabulary and the sort of like the methodologies, and then you could speak about it. So it's again following the trivium. So the
Sounds
grammar
good.
part is kind of what I want to present off the bat. Just kind of go back over, refresh people. So PSYOP, propaganda, the shaping of public perception, political discourse, and societal behavior. And PSYOP and propaganda, both are tools of influence used to shape public opinion, perceptions, and behaviors. And what is PSYOP? Planned operations aimed at influencing emotions, motives, and behavior of target audiences. So it goes back to hearts and minds. And the core objectives shape how people view events, issues, or individuals. That's kind of what we were talking about before, kind of, the Hegelian dialectic, determining the spectrum of discourse, encourage specific actions or discourage opposition, create confusion or disorder with opposition groups, foster trust or loyalty by controlling narratives. Let's see here. White PSYOP would be overt with, this is the types of PSYOP. It's a type of, this falls in line with the types of propaganda as well. So we have white PSYOP, which you could say white propaganda. And the words are kind of interchangeable in some regards, but not totally. So white PSYOP, overt with known sources. So, when does that even happen? Gray PSYOP, ambiguous sources, so we don't really know where it's coming from. Black PSYOP, it's covert and it's falsely attributed information. What is propaganda? Systematic dissemination of biased or misleading information to promote a specific agenda. And if you think about marketing, like I said, Edward Bernays, he's considered the father of modern, advertising / marketing. Well, I have some good quotes from him. but it's a systematic dissemination of bias or misleading information to promote a specific agenda. Again, the Hegelian dialectic. You have a certain outcome that you want to achieve, and you're going to create a premise that kind of leads people in that direction. And let's see here, where am I at? So let's talk about the historical roots. So it evolved during major wars, World War I, World War II. That's modern propaganda, and used to sway. I mean, propaganda is old as civilization. I mean, like we were talking about before, like, you read ancient antiquity text. I mean, propaganda was used. It's been used since the dawn of man. It didn't have the name, but it's like the influence, to influence the people, the masses. If you're one of these people that get ascended to, grand ruler or king or whatever, it's like you got to keep your subjects in line, and in terms of from their perspective, not mine. But so Robin Hood is about that, really. And anyway, so let's move on here. I don't want to get off track like I did last time. Social media campaigns, targeted efforts to influence public opinion online. That's a big one right now. Echo chambers, information environments where only reinforcing ideas are circulated. So that's, we see that all the time. It's like the people on one side of the spectrum versus the other side. It's like there's an echo chamber. There's a consistent repetition of the acceptable dialogue. And if you step outside of that, we see that with personalities, in some of the influencers, and there's a certain amount of acceptable dialogue, and if you don't follow along with that, then you're not going to be a part of it. You're going to be escorted out, so to speak. And with social media, it's very easy.
Yeah. And can I ask you, like, how much, like, of this type of, psyop influence, has been weighed in on, these echo chambers, and, even from like the digital controlling domain and all this stuff, not just, from, having influence on influencers and kind of pitting people into certain, chambers of echoes, right? But, are they actually, going after like the Microsofts and the Facebooks and also social media things to like target, algorithms and all that stuff to have a hidden hand in that?
Absolutely. And then, and we got to be clear about some things. Some of these influencers don't necessarily know they're a part of this grand scheme. They just know that they're being promoted and getting paid to do X, Y, Z. So they don't even have to, like we talk about Joe Rogan quite a bit. I talked about him last time. And like, he's got massive influence. And we talked about the idea that if he was very much a threat to the powers that be, he wouldn't, I mean, he could, with his reach and his target audience and how he can influence people the way he can, it's like he's not a dangerous individual. Like what he's talking about is well within the realms of acceptable dialogue. Anybody that's talking about like things that are actually threatening to the power structure, they get deplatformed or worse. So it very much plays a role.
Yeah, and like for folks like him, it's more considered like a limited hangout, I guess. Would that be more of a suitable term, I guess, or what?
Well, it would be a limited hangout is generally, like Leslie was saying earlier, there's a bit like, QAnon would be considered that's an operation. It's not a person, but it's considered a limited hangout to where there's just a sprinkle of truth enough to where, like, okay, let's look at Flat Earth, for example. It's like there's a certain amount of like truth, as you would say, like people can take facts and just present them, but then they can, when they do that, or QAnon, any of these things, Joe Rogan, that's kind of a different story with Joe Rogan, but let me make this point here. People present a certain amount of truth to create legitimacy. And then once you've been accepted by whoever, target audience, then you can start steering people in the direction you want. That's what QAnon was, 100%. And there's still people that, it's there's no question it's a psyop, no question.
Fuck yeah, that's
and
funny.
I know well, I know the power of influence, man. And it's like, that's why I take a certain stance towards people that fall for these things, because dude, I mean, we're talking about super skilled. I mean, we're talking about people that are masters at their craft, whether it be marketing. Marketing is kind of silly today, but I mean, people know how to influence. Like I think one of our mutual friends, somebody was talking about on the symbolism of some of these corporate logos, and there's a quick people on the sort of more quote conspiratorial side of things. They're kind of falling into the trap of just assuming it's satanic, or it's this or that, or it has some kind of, where my point was, no, it's just marketing people. They understand the power of symbolism, and they know that if they use XYZ symbolism, that, or whatever color, then they know that this is affecting people in a very subconscious way. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're connected with some pedophile ring or some like satanic, you know, um, ultra, corrupt, ultra evil organization. They could be. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just saying, like, that's how marketing people generally use logos and symbols and colors, sound, and they're dipping into all sorts of things now with, flicker rates of screens, and your children will sit there and watch YouTube, and if you let them, and which we don't, but they'll be mesmerized. And when we were kids growing up, the TV, I mean, they knew about flicker rate back then and how it creates a very zombie-like state. And my point is that, look, it's people become very vigilant, and that's why we're talking about or militant, talking about like the vegan and versus the non-vegan, and that sometimes it gets taken to such a degree that you can't allow another person to treat you in a certain way. You're better off just moving on. But there's something to be said for people being influenced in these ways. And I just try to say, like, look, this is masterful manipulation, and we have to have compassion for these people that, whether it be QAnon, flat earth, it's like, hey man, you can believe what you want, but do it in a way that you're not like effing off everybody. And is it improving your life when you're just like 50% of the population is, antagonistic towards you, or 50% of the people you meet? And it's like, as somebody that knows about these things, the subject, it's like, I see what's going on there, but the people that get involved with it, it's like they're not really understand they're being manipulated. And it's like, so that's why I have compassion. I don't try not to be derogatory and condescending, because man, they're masterful. It's masterful. And it's when you
Yeah.
start to include AI, and all these new technologies, I mean, it's, people don't even like the memes. That's why I did a case study on memetic warfare, because
Yeah.
many of the memes we see on social media, it's like they're coming from government intelligence, so on and so forth. They don't look like that, but many are. So
Yeah, I wanted to just kind of comment too on this topic of, like right livelihood. Everybody's trying to make a living. And so there's so much compartmentalization in corporations and so forth, that people, are having jobs as marketers or digital logo creators or whatever they are, that have a sort of a need to know, they're only in their wheelhouse, doing what they're doing, and
same
may
thing as the
not.
military.
Yeah, they may not know the real malevolence of what their work's being used for, right? They may not know the
Absolutely.
agendas, right? So I have some compassion
And
there, but I want to encourage people to open their eyes to think more deeply about what they're doing on
well,
their jobs. Yeah.
and that's a great insight, because the corporate structure was modeled after military structure. And you're absolutely correct. There's a compartmentalization there, because it's a need to know basis. You do your job, and there's somebody as a puppet master up on top, CEO, whoever, and
Yeah,
then there's somebody
hierarchy, chain of
controlling.
command type of stuff, right?
Absolutely. And it, like in the military, for example, like Leslie, like that was a very great insight, because That's exactly how it works. And it's, they don't want certain individuals to know too much, because then that becomes a liability. And same thing in the corporate structure, it's like, so, but it's very, very powerful, symbolic. Like I said, I mean, heck, Confucius had some kind of, I remember there's a quote that I posted a long time ago about the whole world's symbolic. Everything's, everything's, and that's really, again, just goes back to hearts and minds. You're just influencing. And, if you know how to do that with symbols, with some, symbolic, words, again, letters and words or symbols, you're trying to impact an emotion or a thought. I mean, it's not that difficult to influence. I mean, we saw what happened during the 2020 situation, and I had a case study on that. Did we get to that last time? I don't know if we got to that or not.
Not too
I had
much.
a little bit
We
of
didn't do deep at all. Yeah.
you got to be a little careful with how you speak about that, because next thing you know, you're getting
Some
deplatformed. So
censorship. Yeah.
absolutely. So let me get through this real quick, and I'll stop ranting. So misinformation, disinformation, that's false information spread to manipulate perceptions. Key tactics in PSYOP and propaganda. Framing, so presenting information in a way that influences interpretation, shapes how people perceive and react to issues or events. Again, determining the spectrum of debate. Fear mongering, using fear to manipulate public behavior to drive support for policies or actions that might otherwise be opposed. Echo chamber, we talked about that. Astroturfing, that's a big one that we've heard. And we went over all of these two sections that I'm going over now.
Could you give an
on the first
example of
one.
astroturfing? As far as like even like within the past couple of years or whatever. Like for me, like the first time I really heard and thought of astroturfing was like the flat Earth stuff around like 2013 to 15 type of thing. Like before I never
Well,
heard
it's
about it. I was knee deep in all types of stuff, but all of a sudden out of the blue, just like boom, it's all over the place.
Yep.
Type of thing.
When I dug into that a long time ago, kind of what I was coming to the conclusion that was used initially for companies to kick off where we're at now. It's gone really far, but initially when that kicked off, I was researching that, and what I came up with was that was the stage one of internet censorship, because what they were trying to accomplish with that is which let's think about something for a minute. Like, truth bears itself out. Like, at what time, like, why do people have to be protected against, quote, misinformation, disinformation, whatever, right? But when that first kicked off, I remember looking into it. What I came up with was that I had some sources, and I remember this pretty clearly, is that it was the way to kick off the internet censorship, because which we've it's pretty pedestrian now, but what we saw at the time was, hey, this is silly. These people are spreading this. We need to kind of we need to start being, they didn't call it censorship, but they called it, look, I mean, they're spreading all these silly ideas, and the conspiracy theory pejorative. That was, we touched on that. You're delegitimizing like discourse, but the astroturfing, I mean, the definition is creating creating fake grassroots movements to stimulate widespread support. So essentially, they're creating groups, quote, activist groups, or organically, any group, you name it, any group that's allowed to kind of be out and about and do, we talked about BLM and Antifa. Those are two groups that, Antifa's been around forever. I mean, there's other groups too. I mean, there's some of the, whether it be left or right of the spectrum, or flat Earth on the conspiracy. You got your different narratives. You got your left narrative, you got your right narrative, you got your middle narrative, which you got your conspiracy narrative. And all these areas of narrative are being controlled and steered. You have organic groups, you have organic movements that are being, that come to be, that come to fruition. Well, if that's a dangerous movement and it creates a threat to this power structure, then they, like Leslie said, you're going to go and send your people in there if you're part of the controlling class, and you're going to steer it in the direction you want. So when you see these groups operating and doing clearly destructive things, like I just mentioned those two groups, or those are just two that really come to mind because we kind of saw what happened there. And like the media is saying, "Oh, it's peaceful protest," and it's like, well, people are dying, and you're burning down the whole city. And it's like those groups. That's a perfect example of astroturfing. I mean, because they were allowed to operate. When I saw what happened out in Portland, 50 years ago that they would have never let that happen, and yet they're kind of facilitating this to happen, so they want it to happen. Does that make sense? But the media presents it as, oh man, this, and that group BLM, it's like that group was shown to be a complete, it was a complete money laundering scheme. I don't think any of the funds actually went to helping anybody, in any sort of situation. And
I thought there was a situation where they bought a mansion and all that stuff, right? For a select few and all that. But not to help out the
I don't want to pick
lip service. Yeah, not to get into details.
I don't want to pick on.
Just joking.
I don't want to pick on just like. Well, no, it's absolutely correct. I mean, I think the whole the people that were involved. I mean, look, man, it was it's one of those things where, well, like the hippie movement. Let's talk about that. Like, the whole hippie movement was, if you research it, what's that book? Strange Scenes, and what's that, Leslie, out there in California, where all the like even Jim Morrison was involved with that, which I hate because I'm a big fan. I was a big fan of Jim Morrison, still am. But they were promoting the psychedelic. They were trying to create. What was that book? Strange Scenes in Laurel Canyon, or was it? Who was? You know what I'm talking about?
I was in New York back then. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Oh, is that where you're from?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay. So the hippie movement, it was an organic thing that happened in response to the Vietnam War. But then what happened was they started, Timothy Leary, all the psychedelic stuff. That was all government intelligence. That was the CIA. They started bringing in they started pushing the drug culture because it made I'm not trying to denigrate plant medicine and all these other things, but their view was we're gonna get everybody so messed up that they're not going to be violent. Or the Black Panther movement. I had a case study in the Black Panthers. That was COINTELPRO. So they infiltrated a legit movement, and they steer it in a certain direction. Or even now it's like mostly the pendulum swung back to the right wing popular movements, because there's a lot of antagonism, and there's a whole bunch of there's a pressure building based upon what we're seeing happen in migration and some of these other issues, and that tends to be more of the right side of the spectrum. But so all these groups, whenever you see a group that is being promoted through the, just understand that the media it's a gigantic machine. Every bit of it, every bit of popular mainstream media. They used to say mainstream media, it's corporate. It's a propaganda delivery system. It's what's interesting about mainstream media is that it delivers it's like I said before, it delivers two products: propaganda and marketing. That's it. I mean, hey man, you got educational programming in there.
But entertainment, what about that one? Sorry.
Same thing. Same thing, man. It's
like
all you're trying to do
with the word, to enter the mind and hold it for whatever their purposes are, which is those
entertainment,
right? Yeah.
Yep. In the mind, it's like that. I think you guys know Crow 777. He did he was really good with all those sort of the etymology of words and words that he always. I used to listen to Crow 777 all the time. I'm friends with Rose Lindsay, and he would always say words have meaning, and absolutely correct. He's a boomer. He's a boomer, but he's very wise, and he does a very good job. Recommend listen to his work. But yeah, man, it's entertainment. It's like is that the one? Yeah, government govern the mind, and it was I think entertainment was entering the mind or something. So yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Anyway, so that's astroturfing, Derek. That's it's when there's a group that's kind of put out there and promoted. It goes back to Hegelian dialectic, and any type of popular movement that becomes dangerous, they're going to the regime, to the ruling class, or to the, however you want to say it, the powers that be. They're going to find their way into these groups, and they're going to, that's kind of what QAnon was too. There was a popular sentiment amongst certain demographic, people in the middle class, the working class, and I'm of the opinion that they're trying to get rid of the middle class. I think it's going to be more of like a Brazil type of, I love Brazil. I'm not trying to talk down about Brazil, but there's like, my travels, there's like a have versus have not, there's no in between. And yeah, I kind of think that's where it's going. So I think they're trying to kind of do away with that middle class, because, hey, that's problematic. These people want too much. They demand too much, they're a liability. And it's like, we don't have to do that no more. Let's just create animosity between them and let them, you've seen the promotion in media of the Civil War concept, all the movies about like the end of time, not the religious ones, but more like the sort of army, like, like The Road, that movie there, talking about popular culture, talking about the zombie culture. And I had a certain take on the zombie genre because I think it's very symbolic in terms of archetypal. I've always and I was thinking about that, like, what is the deal? Sometimes I get these thoughts. I'm like, what is the deal with this? Like, who wants to watch this? And I did like what was that series about the zombies? It was the first couple seasons.
The Walking
It was,
Dead.
I liked it because it covered like it kind of gave some insight into the preparedness, shit hits the fan type of, because I'm into that, that type of subject matter. Like, but then it got really stupid. I didn't like it about I wasn't a fan of it in terms of like zombie. Like, I didn't pay attention to that. I was like, oh, how are these people kind of dealing with power outage? How are they dealing with lack of supply chain? How they, I was kind of looking at it like that, and I think it had an interesting angle in that regard. But then it's like I didn't watch it for the zombie. That's I can't watch a movie. Like, I cannot watch a movie without if it's just some dumb, like, I'll point it out right away. I'm like, I can't watch movies no more. I can't, because I'm like, they're just trying to promote this. It's all propaganda. It's like totally. So anyway, all right, let me get through this, guys. Astroturfing. So misleads the public and decision makers about the level of public support or opposition. Perception management. That's a big one. Controlling, and these are all terms, official terms. Perception management, controlling the flow of info to shape public perceptions, directs how people understand and engage with information. Modified limited hangout. Partial truth mixed with misinformation to distract or conceal larger facts. So we talked about that, Leslie. Creates the illusion of transparency while hiding critical details. So applications of PSYOP and propaganda. If I'm going too fast, let me know. You could break in any time. Just let me know. I'm just going through my notes here. Applications of PSYOP and propaganda in modern context. Political campaigns. Framing opponents negatively, spreading disinformation to sway voters, influence elections, outcomes, and public perception of candidates. Corporate influence, tactic, astroturfing, and perception management to oppose regulation or promote products. Effect, it shifts public opinion to favor corporate interest over public good. Geopolitical conflicts, we see a lot of that happening. Framing interventions as humanitarian efforts or spreading disinformation just to destabilize adversary. Here's a real good one. Oh, Lindsey Graham, I absolutely loathe. He had a quote where he's talking about how we need to send more weapons to Israel as opposed to help the people down in the southeastern part of the United States with Hurricane Helen, because we need to, and this goes back to Bush. We need to fight them over there so they don't come here. Geopolitical conflict. I mean, how many times have you heard that? That it's silly. I mean, it's framing. I hate bringing him up. I loathe that man. Social movements, controlled opposition or infiltration to weaken or manipulate social movements. The effect weakens activist groups or diverts movements from their goals. So we just talked about COINTELPRO. There's other work going on now with the right-wing movements, because that's more where the opposition is right now, because the spectrum has shifted to the left. And again, it's like, this pendulum is, it's like, it's being controlled. It's like, back in the day, the FBI was like, there's people legit going after quote communists and sympathizers and so on and so forth. Now it's the right wing stuff, and it's like they're shifting people, and there's no in between. There's no spectrum, and that never happens in nature. That's not how. So whenever you see that, that there's bad shit at foot. There's dishonesty and inversion. And go ahead, Derek. You have something to say, bud?
Oh yeah. Big question, and probably should have been asked, even like the last live stream, but it seems quite obvious and evident that these psychological operations and whoever's my question is pretty much who's giving the orders of these things, because it's beyond politics, it's beyond left and right, it's beyond a lot of other corporate interests, even though there might be alliances or allegiances to said corporate entities or whatever the fuck. What's going on at the top, and who's giving the orders to bring these things into reality and influence, I guess.
Well, see, just like you were talking about decentralization before, there isn't one. There's circles of influence. There's various groups, and they're not all. That's one big problem I have with much of the alternative media, is that some of the folks we know, is that they fall into that echo chamber where it's like, that's we're going to point to Klaus Schwab and WEF, and there you go, there's the answer. People want something. That's not how it works. You have I like to what I think Jay Dyer, I think he brought this metaphor up, talking about like the different various organized crime rings, understanding these different power structure groups that in our society, oftentimes who has access to the most money has influence and has the ability to influence. But then you got these these Illuminati, you have these groups of influence, which that's a kind of that's another one of those given, that's a conspiracy narrative. It's you've seen where it's been taken. It gets to the point where it's silly. But
yeah, like the boogeyman type of archetype or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there ain't one. Sorry, go ahead.
Exactly.
I see people that'll say like, oh, it's the Freemasons, oh, it's the Catholic Church, oh, it's the Jews, oh, it's these, Bilderberg group.
Right,
like they're just trying to say it's all one.
Trilateral formation, WEF.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
But they all have an influence.
Well, I mean, there's billion. Like I've been listening, like send you guys that podcast, and part of why I wanted to send that was because the speaker was giving he was given an example, like, hey man, not everybody that's a billionaire is evil and wants to promote like Bill Gates tier DEPOP via whatever. It's like there are people that just because people there's individuals that exist that are billionaires, that have a lot of material wealth that are not evil people, and in fact, they're quite aware. There's been a big talk about, the PayPal mafia, Elon, Peter Thiel, and I've even fallen to that. I think X is a Trojan horse because they're collecting everyone's data and everything that everyone's saying there. They have this I have my particular feeling about X, and I would just say that, hey man, if you're going to say something and you're going to put it out there, be prepared for it to come back on you at some point in the future, because they're keeping track of everything you say. So if you're saying, if you think you're getting away with something, you're not. And it's like everything we do online now. So I see a lot of people that are saying, and I'm like, hey man, if you're not worried about that, if you just believe you're going to say what you should be saying, then fine. But don't be surprised. And about, if it comes down to, we live in a situation where, going back to that mental health issue in PSYOP and government, where they're like, hey, these quotes you said here on X 10 years ago, hopefully this never happens, but hey, we need to talk to you. We need to bring you over here and talk to you because, you're a threat. They did that
It's
in the
like
Soviet
Joe
Union.
McCarthy, right? The hunts for the
Yep,
communists or whatever. Yeah, it came back and bit people.
absolutely. Absolutely. And there was a legit threat. But there is, when people have access to power, and the FBI has the ability to, kill people, imprison people, and there's always going to be corruption and corrupt people in these organizations. So that's where it becomes so let me get back to this real quick, and hopefully I get through this without ranting and getting sidetracked. ADHD, what can I say? Geopolitical conflicts. So, we went over that. Social movements. This is the application of PSYOP propaganda in modern context. Social movements, controlled opposition or infiltration to weaken or manipulate social movements. We're talking about the hippie movement, or the movement that was organically, there was a pressure valve. You can understand things in those terms. There's like a pressure that's building, and the control of the social movements allows that pressure to be released in a controlled way. So like with the hippie movement, there was all that. I'm just using this term because that's kind of what they labeled it, but the pressure, the pressure was building because of the opposition to the Vietnam War. And so what did they do? They had to infiltrate it. And again, we're going to keep going back to these same sort of fundamentals. It's like, it's weakens activist groups and diverts movements from their goals. So the role of technology and social media, modern PSYOP propaganda, social media algorithms. So this is kind of what you were talking about earlier, Derek. Amplify content based on engagement, creating echo chambers. Oftentimes we wonder, like, we're putting out positive messaging and messaging to uplift people, as opposed to just wallow in the muck and keep them in the mud. And you don't get it. I get banned. I get Facebook banned, shadow banned all the time, and because of whatever. Maybe I shared something that community standards, and that's very much in alignment with the Soviet and sort of the communist regimes like Mao and China. North Korea, I don't know what that place is, but apparently it's like those other two, allegedly. So social media algorithms reinforces existing beliefs, increasing polarization. So there we go, back to polarization, defining the parameters of discussion. You don't really, there's like Derek and I, or Leslie, we might be taught, with some of the people we know that are doing these streams, the discussion is kind of outside the parameters over here, maybe discussing these other topics, and it's like, it's very difficult for people talking about these things to really, quote, be successful in terms of social media influence. It's hard to make a living doing this stuff, right? Richard Grove, heck, man, he does a 7-hour stream, man. It's like, and it's hard to really, bring all this really great information, to people, and it's not popular. It's not, it's relevant and it's objectively true, but a lot of people just aren't too concerned with that. It's amazing when you see some of the just the interaction with, just like, I'll see somebody share the same meme 100 times and it's like 1,000 likes, and I'm like, so anyway, like I said, we have to have compassion, and we have to keep doing what we're doing, and try to put, create and try to put, elevate people. That's what all of us have in common, in our own different ways. So there's that. Let me go over these terms real quick, and then we can dive into some of these case studies. Because I had something I brought up, the geoengineering, HARP, and PSYOP. So we've seen a bunch of quite a bit of conspiracy theories and speculation on, that. Which, hey man, I did some research, and yeah, there's very real. Like there's real technology to influence. You can't really say whether it was or not, because we don't have access to the, But anyway, so here's I'm gonna go over those terms again. So PSYOP, it's again going over the nomenclature. So the grammar part of these are some key terms. PSYOP, so operations aimed at influencing emotions, motives, and behavior of target audiences. Propaganda, dissemination of biased or misleading information to promote a particular political cause or point of view. Disinformation, deliberate, and these are all terms. These are all like vocabulary. This is a vocabulary list of some key terms. So the grammar. Disinformation, deliberate dissemination of false or misleading information to deceive and manipulate public perception. Misinformation, and what have we heard? I mean, this is in Europe, especially the EU. This is and we're starting to hear it here now. What is one of the leading arguments for censorship? Misinformation, disinformation. And if you think about it, wouldn't the powers that be influence disinformation and wouldn't they be like, hey, look, synthesis, it's the Hegelian dialectic. We're going to promote these. What we're going to eventually say is disinformation, misinformation for the greater good. So, like we talk about memes or some of these, topics, flat Earth, whatever. It's like, if they're going to use that to censor people, why wouldn't they be promoting it? Because that's part of their Hegelian dialectic. There, you know what I mean? They already have the outcome that they want, and it's like, well, we need to protect people. There's so much disinformation that no one can figure out what's true, and it's like, so we need to censor XYZ,
And they already have like both sides
astroturfing,
established and all that stuff, right? Like
absolutely. And
a foresight and
in
a
Europe.
side and all that, yeah.
Well, in Europe, they're promoting. I mean, man, it's just like all the time I see it. Misinformation. You can't talk about certain things. You can't. There's no dialogue, and that's censorship. And if people talk about the Second Amendment, but like if you lose, there was a Belgian. I seen the rounds being made. This guy, he was talking about the controlling some Belgian. I can't remember exactly what he was, but he did a whole series on how the masses were sort of manipulated during the 2020 event. And one of the things I took away from what he said, he's like a PhD sociologist, but he's like not academic in terms of like he's really outside the box. That's generally the type of people I gravitate towards. I see him a mile, we see him a mile away. And he was talking about how everyone thinks it, especially in America, it's like the Second Amendment is the most important quote right, but it's like, well, the First Amendment, it's like if there's no room for debate, then you're done. So that's actually, don't get me wrong, like I'm armed, let's just say that, but and that's very much gives people the right, the ability to protect themselves. And yeah,
But free speech is very important, because without that, we don't know.
It's very important.
We lose the ability to fully discern even how to use our Second Amendment rights in a way, like it creates confusion and limited information. Yeah, it's really important.
It's almost like thinking about movies, Derek, like Idiocracy. It's like you get people so dumbed down that they don't even have the ability to defend the position. But before that, before the dumbing down happens, you get rid of their ability to defend their position. And then people just stop doing it, and then there's all these other sort of angles of attack too, where it's like, educational system and not teaching people the trivium, not teaching people how to, think, just critical thinking. So false flag operation, we know what that is. Covert op. This this goes back to, I mean, Sun Tzu talks about false flags, covert operation designed to deceive by making it appear as if actions are being carried out. Make sure I'm not okay.
Damn, wait. So how many of these psyops do you think they took, in their handbook from, the art of war and that kind of stuff? Because, there's a lot of stuff
Quite a bit.
treading on those waters, right?
He was a master at it, and he was, clearly coming from I mean, though, what he was talking about. Have you read that? Have you read the Art of War?
Kind of not completely, I have to admit, but
Archive.com. I'm a big
yeah.
fan of archive.com and
I
talking about
I
censor
was
and
listening to
speech.
the audio.
They were,
yeah, but yeah.
it's
So
one of those classics, man. It's and I'm actually going to I'm going to touch on that with those books that I'm going to recommend. That's one of them, I believe. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, man, it's deception, warfare, deception. I mean, he was talking about it. Yeah, I mean, it's these fundamentals are, I mean, they're ancient.
yeah,
Much
are
of it.
there any
I mean,
other
with
books that
technology,
were
it's
highly influenced on, the whole psyop domain
oh yeah.
of these things?
You want me to head over and go over some of that right now, or do you want me to go over
Sure.
the terms?
Yeah,
All right,
finish the terms if you
I'll
want. I know I can hold off that question for later if
Yeah,
you want.
I'll go that
follow your
I'll
train of
go.
thought.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
I was just saying, follow your order. Follow what you organize.
Well, I wanted to go over these and I can again I'll link these. I mean, and really this is just like busy work right here. It's like establishing the nomenclature and the so false flag. We talked about that. Modified limited hangout. The release of partial truth mixed with disinformation to distract or mislead the public while hiding critical information. So sprinkling the truth and framing. And this is again this is very much parallel to marketing and advertising. Framing, presenting information in a specific way to influence how it is interpreted by the public. Echo chamber, we went over that. Cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort experience when holding conflicting beliefs or being presented with new information that can contradict established views. So understanding cognitive dissonance, propagandists and psyop people, they know that people, it's like that old Mark Twain quote, which I have for later. It's about like it's easier to convince people well, I'm gonna screw it up about being deceived or something like that. I'm getting that wrong. Perception management, actions designed to control or influence the way people perceive event. Controlled opposition. This is a big one. Infiltrating or creating opposition movements to monitor, manipulate, or neutralize dissent. Let's see here. Bandwagon effect, the tendency for people, and all this is sociological. I mean, PSYOP covers that intro, that one video I took from the fourth PSYOP group, which they talk about. There's a man talking about what PSYOP is. We're talking about sociology. We're talking about psychology. We're talking about language. We're talking, I mean, all these things. So a lot of this, it resonates with sociology as well as psychology. It's not just a psychological thing. There's a lot of, history, anthropology. So the bandwagon effect. So we went over that. So tendency of people to adopt certain behavior styles or attitudes because others are doing so. We've seen that our whole lives. Virtue signaling, expressing opinions or making gestures to demonstrate one's moral correctness. Often without meaningful actions. We talked about putting a sign up in your yard, because that's virtue signaling. You're not actually doing anything to affect change. You're putting a sign up in your yard, or you're putting that cover over your Facebook picture, which was a big thing at some point. It's like, I don't think people do that as much anymore. I know why they don't actually, because I use that to find, like, I remember when the 2020 thing was happening. I'm pretty convinced this is why they don't do that as much. When 2020 was happening, I was able to identify individuals, because what I was doing during that whole thing was running counterprop. It's like all I was doing was taking footage from all over the world and the reaction to what was happening, and especially from Australia. And I was just reposting, and I was getting banned constantly. But what I was able to do was I was able to target individuals who were of a particular mindset. And I had that Facebook account that I blasted past 5,000, and I started I was doing counter propaganda, man, because I'm like, I could do this. I know what to do. And boy, it didn't last long. They shut me down big time. And I was just taking news footage from like Australia, and you know, and it was crazy. So that's why I think Facebook stopped doing. I've noticed that people don't do that as much, with the covers, because I think they figured out that people can, target people, and they're in the business of advertising partly. So it's like, if I can determine my target audience as a propagandist or psyop guy or marketer or advertiser, I don't need to pay you. You know what I mean? So I went through manually, and I was having a lot of impact on that project that lasted about a month before they totally. I don't even know where that account went.
Fuck,
So,
man. Real
yeah.
quick before you get right back into it, because like what came to mind, when you're going over all these, all these terms, the majority of the population would not be able to give a proper definition of these. It seems, and so like that then and there, it's like it's already over. Like argument destroyed. As far as like my question was going to be like, geez, do the people behind all these things and are carrying out psychological operations, do they know a shit ton more than the average people that they're playing these things on? So an
The
obvious
people
yes,
that
right?
are
Like, yeah,
well,
it's so sad.
the people that are actually the people that are the experts at doing it, and they're just getting directives from wherever. It could be intelligence, could be government, could be private organizations. Rand Corporation is a big one. What was the other one over in England? It was
Like
what was that
Tavistock or
group called?
something.
Yes. That was, excuse me, that was a big one. That was
And
big
Fabian
psyop stuff.
Society and all that shit too.
Yeah. I mean,
Franklin Institute.
there's a private. There's private organizations that are specifically in the, like Rand Corporation's a big one. I mean, they were back. That's a very storied. But there's many. Even during the 2020 event, there were particular there were organizations that were built just for that messaging. And they were we've heard private public partnership, which America, the military industrial complex. So they've always privatized their arms manufacturing. DARPA, that's like a private public partnership. It's always, the military industrial complex in America has always been a private public partnership, always has. Whereas, like, say Russia, that's a state. Like they create, the state builds all of their weapons. China, same thing. So it's capitalist versus. It's more of a. It's a whole different topic, but so demonization, portraying an individual group or country as evil or subhuman. That's called the enemy image. So presenting the enemy, whoever that may be or whatever that may be, as evil. We saw a lot of this after 9/11. Demonization of groups that were mostly financed by the West. Character assassination, so intentionally damaging an individual's reputation to undermine their credibility or influence. Gaslighting, that's a big one, a form of psychological manipulation where the victim is made to doubt their own perception, reality, or memory. There's a big movie on that. There's a lot of people that touched on that in alternative media. Perception warfare. Oh, that reminds me of who were the what's the I'm blanking on the couple that, I should know this, but I'm having trouble because I'm doing all this. But who's the couple? Dykes. The Dykes.
Truthstream Media.
Yeah, Truthstream Media. They put together a really good
Fuck yeah.
program on gaslighting, and
Aaron Dykes
based
and
upon that,
Melissa. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And that was somewhere in my, like I said, I'm getting older, man. Gaslighting, they did a really great I think feature on gaslighting, and that's a term that actually was taken from that movie, like back in the, was it 50s or like 40s or something, and where that dude comes in and like just manipulates the woman for her riches, and he keeps telling her that, telling people that that's
in her head.
what you're seeing. Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's very easy to do now with social media and AI and the holographic all the stuff we hear about, the blue beam and all this stuff. which a lot of that's PSYOP too, by the way. And there's technology that can do that, but you know, let's just say this, a lot of the quote popular conspiracy, once that conspiracy topic makes it to like such a flashpoint that it becomes part of the quote conspiracy vernacular, it becomes a
meme.
You could probably much yes. Once that happens, you can very much, I'm always looking at that from the angle of that's propaganda, it's psyop. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, like I said, much of the alternative media, it's like they're allowing themselves to find their ways into these echo chambers. I mean, and it's like, you know, I'm not saying that there's not legitimate dialogue and like research to be had there, you know, but you have to be careful to think critically, you know. Perception warfare, so efforts to shape, distort, or control public perception. Reflexive control, so this is what Leslie was talking about, like the automatic response. So a method of influencing opponents' decision making by controlling their perceptions and reactions to false information. Narrative control, that's a big one. The practice of controlling the dominant story or account of events. Okay, narrative control, the practice, okay. Information saturation, bombarding the public with excessive information to distract or overwhelm, making it difficult to discern the truth. This is a big one. This is
Yeah, and
like we were
honestly,
talking about, like it's hard for,
in the beginning, I kind of got
go ahead.
that confused, you know, in years past, of confusing that with astroturfing, because they almost seem hand in hand sometimes, like having something oversaturated and they're trying to take over that turf. In there, it's like just like this like the synthetic, you know, population or popularity of something, you know, propagated up, if you will, through
Well, I
the
mean,
operation. And I can see how
let me
things can
let me give
overlap. But yeah, sorry, go. My bad.
no, go ahead.
No, that was all. I just wanted.
I was going to say that's a great point. That's a great point, and a good way to look at that is thinking about muddying the waters. So when you're looking into, like, say, a lake in a shallow area, and the water's clear, and then something maybe there's a rock thrown in there, and it, you know, falls to the bottom, and all of a sudden you got it's all muddy, you can't see anything. So information saturation, that's kind of what that's about. And you know, again, this is a term, this is a method, it's a strategy. So it's like and what is social media but information saturation? And what do you end up doing with social media oftentimes? You know, most people, it's like people are on it for hours and hours and hours and hours, and it's like you know, part of that's being, you know, part of it has to do with like manipulation of algorithms, and like they're legit like influencing people's sort of mind, you know. But I mean, they're literally like, you know, what was the number 2 guy in Facebook that stepped down? He talked about how they were intentionally trying to influence dopamine. You know, they studied it, and they, you know, they're like, hey, this is how we give these people this dopamine. So they introduce, and I don't know how they did it exactly, but I didn't really look into it that much, but it makes perfect sense. You got your little partner there, man.
A new kitty.
Just chilling out. Can you hear?
Yeah, you're doing great.
Information suppression. Information suppression, deliberately withholding or censoring critical information. And I'm trying to get through this. I know, Derek, man, I got massive props to you, man. It's like, I know it's late there.
Not at all. We're good.
Your work ethics.
It's all good, brother.
Your work ethic second to none, dude. It's like you're constantly hustling, dude. I respect that.
I was gonna say the same to yours too, man. But yeah, not to go on that.
We try.
This is important stuff, and I appreciate the foundation you're laying. So keep going. Yeah.
So fear mongering, so deliberately creating fear in the public by exaggerating threats to achieve political, economic, or social goals. Divide and conquer. Everyone knows what that is. Subversion. Efforts to undermine power, authority, or legitimacy of an institution or government from within. Many of people on our side of the spectrum, it's like we have a pretty much distaste or distrust towards institutions of power, but not necessarily every institution is there to do people harm. It's like, so again, falling into that sort of echo chamber. It's like, even with everyone, it's like, just be careful to not allow your outlook to be pushed in one direction or another. Try to be critical, try to constantly apply your critical thinking. Maybe you're right, maybe you're correct, maybe that is correct. Agent provocateur, this is a pretty well known one. A person who infiltrates an organization or movement with the intent of inciting members to commit acts that discredit the group. But those are always individuals who represent some sort of power group or power structure. Black propaganda, we talked about that. False information or material that you don't know where it's coming from. The white propaganda, gray propaganda, that's all self-explanatory. So psychological projection, this is more of a psychology term, which is accusing others of the behavior. Projection, accusing others of the behaviors or motives that one is guilty of to divert attention or control the narrative. That almost falls into the category of fallacy as well. Echo chamber amplification. So that's a process by which ideas and beliefs are repeated and reinforced within a closed system, leading to extreme or entrenched views. So those echo chamber amplifications, good PSYOP people and propaganda people, they're pushing the meme, for example. It's like, that's sort of that, because the meme oftentimes is appealing to a particular group, and when you're constantly just promoting this messaging, it's like you're amplifying that messaging. And if it's an echo chamber, if it's something that's constantly being reinforced, hence the echo chamber with a particular target audience, that's a very strong strategy. So weaponized information, the use of information or data to cause harm, manipulate, or control others. Dehumanization, so stripping individuals or groups their human qualities, where we've seen that recently. A lot of that lately. So that's another type of enemy image type of effect. So presenting people as, they're not human, basically. So we can justify our terrible acts towards them. The public will, support that because, hey man, they're not. It's that enemy image type of idea, like creating an image of the enemy, whether it's true or not. It's like you're just trying to dehumanize people. And whenever that happens, sure to follow is going to be, a lot of death. So that's always something you got to look for. Framing effect, we went over that. Cognitive infiltration, the deliberate infiltration of groups or networks with the intent of disrupting their communication and unity. So cognitive infiltration, that's the same as steering the groups. Let's see here. Linguistic framing, using specific language and terminology to shape the way issues are understood and discussed by the public. We discussed that earlier. Changing the definition of words to suit, we saw that back in 2020. Well, what's the definition of the VA thing? Well, they all of a sudden changed the definition of what that is, just because it suited their, we all know what happened there. Normalization, the process of making radical or controversial ideas, actions, or policies appear normal and acceptable through repeated exposure. And we talked about that last time, Leslie, about the normalization of, certain procedures, with children, and how oftentimes there's, if you look into it, there's a lot of money being made off of that whole thing. Straw man argument, that's a fallacy, misrepresenting an opponent's position to make it easier to attack or refute. Smear campaign, some of these are self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go into it. Echo effect, phenomenon where repeated exposure to an idea strengthens belief in it. Cult of personality, that's a big one. That's a real big one. The creation of a heroic, idealized image of a leader to foster loyalty and control over a population. That's a real big one. Appeal to authority. And it's funny because with the cult of personality, and I used to love that song, man. When I was a kid, I was into this stuff, man. Like, I seen through this. And the cult of personality song, if you remember that, legendary, and it's like, there's some question as to where that came from or not, but and it's mainstream music, like Rage Against the Machine was, but it's still called the personalities, a very real thing. Appeal to authority, We know what that is. False equivalence. That's incorrect assertion to two fundamentally different things, or morally or factually equivalent. Manufacturing consent. This is where Noam Chomsky. I used to read Noam Chomsky when I was 9th, 10th grade in high school, and I'm 46. Manufacturing consent, and this is one of the books that I've picked to go over. That was a major one. And Noam Chomsky, he's very much left of the spectrum, but he was very critical of the sort of American or the corporate. I mean, there's plenty of criticism for Noam Chomsky, but he's one of the people that introduced me to sort of foreign policy and like what, kind of along the terms of spreading democracy and all that was about. And this goes back to War is a Racket by Smedley Butler and Confessions of an Economic Hitman by Perkins. That goes into manufacturing consent, kind of has a lot to do with how you're promoting these certain, especially military activities, and you're, you want to seek approval because it's something that's going to get the attention of people. If you go in and start bombing a country, or like a long time ago was Latin America, and you're going to have to create some kind of narrative to get support, because it's like
kind of like the Confessions of an Economic Hitman. I'm sure.
Absolutely.
That, Leslie, yeah,
absolutely.
Well, 9/11 and the Holy Rock story, Saddam Hussein, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So that's basically the terminology and the that is the overview. Did you guys want me to go into, Derek, did you want me to go into some of those books now, or did you want me to go through some of these case studies?
Yeah, sure. Whenever it's clever, whenever you feel. Leslie, you do want
I think case studies now and
yeah,
say
sure.
Okay. So I have so I got the C19 event. I don't know if we went over that. I have the geoengineering HARP and its sort of interplay with PSYOP. The dietary manipulation. I have PSYOPs and propaganda, mental health, climate change, and the Great Reset. Where did I put? Did I mention the diet? Oh, there it is. So, which one would you guys like to go over first? Anyone in particular? The geoengineering one. It's kind of like it's a little bit kind of angled. It's not as much like I wanted to go over. The big thing I thought with that is that like I wanted to know exactly what the capabilities are of that particular area, because what I'm seeing right now is everything is what I'm seeing on social media is people are being very much polarized in one direction or the other. It was a controlled event versus you're crazy for even thinking that. So what I wanted to do was like present like, hey, the capability to control weather. Many of us know that, but what I'm seeing with this event is that you're seeing people get polarized, and I'm like, so I'm automatically thinking like this is something that we need to look at. But did you guys want to go in any particular direction with that?
Why don't you start with that? Yeah,
Yeah,
what
definitely.
you're discovering about the
There's
manipulation and.
I just ran across
Okay, so I
made years ago of something to the tune of paraphrasing that like any talk or argument in support of global warming is ostensible if geoengineering is not included in that rhetoric in a sense.
Well, yeah, and my assertion is that they're geoengineering a couple degrees of warmth. I came across a couple. There's a podcast that a guy, you guys know Higher Side Chats. You've heard of Higher Side Chats.
Greg Carlson or Carwood.
Yeah, Carwood.
Yeah,
and he's one of my friends on Facebook, and I must have been him for
I pay for
years.
that. Yeah.
He's from I think he lives out in San Diego. He does great. He does a lot of good
San Diego,
stuff.
for sure.
So a lot of much of his content I'm not totally into, but he does some really good stuff. And he did this. This was this interview he did with a guy who actually he studied the geoengineering climate change, and he had a very solid bit of information to back his claim up, which his claim was, and I differ with him a little bit, but his claim was is that they changed the fuel mixture back in the 70s and 80s, and the chemtrails, the people, oh shit, I probably should say that, I'll probably get banned for that. The exhaust, it creates a low-lying cirrus cloud, a blanket, and that's actually trapping heat. So what you're saying, Derek, is that according to I think his name was Mike Lee. You guys go check out Greg Carlwood over at Higher Side. It's an older episode. You have to search it in Google. It's I think it's Mike Lee, something Lee.
But
And
he interviewed Alana Freeland as well. She wrote a book called, I don't know if it's titled that, but think of ionospheric heating. That's one of the operations that are involved in the geoengineering. So like just the heating of the ionosphere, like hello, like with that alone, yeah, like going back to what you're saying, yeah, sorry. With the jet fuel just changing. Yeah, like
well, I mean, and there was no reason to do it, which it created more of it didn't make any sense that they changed it because it became more expensive. His basic assertion is that there was, and he had so much information to back this up. He's like, they're trying to raise the temperature by a couple degrees by basically, changing and this is how they figured out they would change the fuel mixture, which would create these quote trails, which would trap heat because it creates a blanket of cirrus cloud. We all see how that works. And the idea that he came up with was that they were trying to melt Antarctica to get out the resources there. And he was like, everybody's got a claim to that land, so they must know. And so what they're doing in order to kind of create this control system is they're using the climate change and it's you people, you got to give up your individual liberty because look at what you're doing. And they don't even address nations that are the most polluting nations, which are we know what those are. I mean, people can figure that out because we have in the West, we have pretty strict standards in terms of all that nuclear power. It's like part of that podcast I sent you all, he goes into some of that, which is it ties into what this dude was saying. So I'd recommend people to go check that out. So yeah, I mean, just with that argument, it's like, again, the polarization. It's like, it's either this or that. It's like, no, it's a spectrum. And somewhere in there, you're going to find bits and pieces. You might be able to make the puzzle into a picture, but sometimes we can't, but it's like, so it's better just to get as much information. So geoengineering, so part of what I did with this was kind of go into the technology. So it's pretty thick in terms of notes. So this is geoengineering HARP, and I put this together at the last minute, like when I told you guys in PSYOP. So I tried to tie in how it's kind of being used, like I already explained. So geoengineering, weather mod tech, it's they've been subjects of discussion and conspiracy theories for decades. And so HARP stands for High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, and it involves cloud seeding methods, which has been around forever, and they're viewed as tools for environmental manipulation that go beyond weather control for agriculture. For agriculture, military purposes. So from a PSYOP perspective, the deliberate manipulation of weather and climate through geoengineering creates a complex field for social control, public perception management, and even covert military operations. Now, being an ex-military guy, going back to what Leslie said before about the compartmentalization, there isn't necessarily the majority of people don't necessarily know what they're involved with in terms of the big picture, depending upon who you are and what you're doing. It's like we talked about Michael Aquino and how I was trying to emphasize how important that dude is in terms of understanding PSYOP and how much of what the the story. I think they went after Michael Aquino because he like I said, I watched hours. I'm gonna get back on topic here, but all the sort of psyop behind the character assassination of him. There is no way that a man like that dude, like he did exactly what I did in the military, except he was the guy that basically created a lot of the psyop sort of um he created a lot of the psyop, but like he was an outside the box type of guy. And he was involved with the Temple of Sit and all these things, and he got tied into that Monterey pedophile thing. And I'm like, look, that dude, he had security clearances I'd never even heard of. There's no way he's not gonna get, like, that's not how that works. Like, so I think they went after him because I watched hours of his interviews, and he was revealing a lot of information, and he knew a lot of. He talked about MK Ultra, and he talked about how MK Ultra was silly, and how like he knew the people involved with MK Ultra, and he's like, you can't actually influence people in that way, like grooming, for example. Like, you can't force anybody to do what you want them to do unless you start getting to the biology area, unless you start tapping into their.
Well, trauma does that. That's the whole thing. Is trauma,
Yeah.
Creates such a degree of dissociation.
Yep.
Right?
His point was like the MK Ultra was a lot about creating like that sort of Manchurian candidate type of. That's what that was about in particular. There's other, like I sent you guys that link on the Monroe Institute and some of the other. They were dealing with the in my opinion, looking at that, the Monroe Institute, that program that I sent you a link on, I think, like they were dealing with remote viewing and all these other things. And as far as I could see, there's some crazy stuff about, like there's some stuff there. And they studied, the CIA and the Army did. But what Aquino was kind of getting at was that you can't actually, MK Ultra was a massive waste of money because you can't control people's like behavior. At the end of the day, they're going to do what they choose to do. This goes back to Viktor Frankl, his famous book, Man's Search for Meaning. And so that's kind of where he was coming from. But he's somebody that people should look at, and everyone should go and read Mind War. I have that linked in my group. Actually, there's a PDF there. So, all right.
Yeah, that's huge, and that's kind of what some of those intro videos were kind of based on, the Mind Wars and all that.
His whole approach to PSYOP was he went to PSYOP because he wanted to find a way to not kill people. Like he said, like, and this is supposed to be some evil. It's like, I've listened to hours. Like, he's completely consistent from a 10-year frame. I'm like, I pick up on these things, and I'm like, that dude is just, he's like honest to a fault. And I'm like, he's not involved. So I figured out like they were trying to go after him because he was saying too much. He's got really interesting takes on, I wasn't looking into his background in the Temple of Sit stuff. I was looking at the PSYOP perspective. He's an outside the box type of thinker, and it's like there was nothing in his person, like there was nothing there that led me to believe that he was involved with any of those types of things that they were. I think they went after him. I really do.
I will say that there is some evidence that he was involved with the sexual trafficking and manipulation of individuals. I mean, so
okay. Well, if that's true, then take that into consideration. But if you're going to, I would recommend reading Mind War, which is what he's responsible for, because there's a lot to be there. I'm not saying that's wrong. That could very well be the case. I don't know the guy, but I don't want people to like. I want people to go read what he wrote in terms of Mind War. So I'm trying to like. Anyway.
Yeah, I kind of see him as like an Aleister Crowley type of archetype, in a sense, where author of books and this and that, had a major influence. Crowley, if people didn't know, he was like MI5 or some shit like that.
Oh, is that right?
Like double agent type of stuff, into the spiritual world, but also behind the scenes on some other military type operational stuff. But
Well, yeah, he was hooked up with Graham Parsons and all those guys, and they were all involved with like Is it Graham Parsons?
Yeah, what's that guy's name? Fuck.
And then L. Ron Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard.
Oh, really? Oh, shit.
Dianetics. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were all.
Dianetics, yeah.
Yeah, man, and they were all connected with like Air Force intelligence. I mean, yeah, dude, it's crazy. It's crazy.
What the hell, man? Shit.
I mean, Kathy O'Brien has some references to Aquino, and I have like my own kind of association that I've seen to that name related to some pretty corrupt shit. So I bet you it is a bit of a big bag, but I don't know.
Yeah, everything is. And
Yeah.
but definitely go check out Mind War, and he wrote that, and there's a lot of good information. In fact, something he was talking about was the binaural beats, and that's kind of what the Monroe. When I heard the Monroe at that stream, they were talking about Monroe Institute. And they were talking about influencing. They were talking, like, I sent you guys that link about the remote viewing, and there was something about like binaural beats, and I was like, holy shit. I was like, Aquino was talking about that on one of those podcasts, one of those interviews I heard. You know, now we know what those are, right? We know now, but like back in the day, like they use those to sort of and he was talking about that, and it's like I was like, what the no, binaural beats. It's like people listen to that to get calm or something, and it's like, and then I read just recently the guy was talking about how they use that to induce trance states, and I'm like, whoa, wait a second, there's a connection there. So worth looking into for sure. I mean, I definitely don't want to be defending somebody that did, you know, these sort of bad things, but
yeah, no worries.
Might be the case.
And I brought up Crawley just because, you know, he brought up some good information and wrote books, and, you know, people just need to distinguish, you know, the information from the character. It doesn't even matter in the end. Like, what are people actually taking away from that and applying to their life or reality to make anything better? Okay, Chris Jansen said Jack Parsons. Okay, cheers, brother.
Yeah, there you go. I said what I say, Graham Parsons. Yeah, Jack Parsons. There you go.
All right. So speaking of Dianetics, it reminds me of dietary ethics, to make a little rhyming scheme to a segue of another case study that you want to bring up.
You want to get into that instead? Okay.
Unless
that harp,
kind of
the harp thing.
Because we're kind of reaching on 2 hours, so I don't know how much more time you had, Leslie, also, but yeah.
I'm good for that, man.
Flowing. I'm here. I don't have a deadline, so just keep flowing.
Yeah, neither do I. Yeah, it's all too good.
Do you want to hear about the dietary stuff there?
Sure.
You want to get on that, or you want to? We could do. I mean, the harp thing is like, I just went into a lot of detail about like kind of what it is. We could touch on that some other time or later.
I mean, if you have some other specific points that you want to highlight on the harp, go ahead and do that before we transition.
Okay.
Yeah, and also, I'm just trying to be cute sometimes, you know, my little shenanigans.
Man, you're always a handsome guy, bro.
Brother. Yeah,
anyways. So kind of going into what HARP was. So geoengineering, kind of going, you know, laying a foundation for this topic. Geoengineering refers to deliberate manipulation of Earth's climate system. It's often presented as a response to global warming and environmental degradation. So there we go. Techniques such as solar radiation management, SRM, cloud seeding. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's good. Sorry? Sorry to interrupt, but that's fine, yeah. They're asking me if I want something to eat. Sounds great. Yeah, just go ahead. My normal. Thank you. Sorry about that. Techniques such as geoengineering refers to deliberate manipulation of Earth's climate systems. I mean, climate change. So if they can do it, you know, it's like, again, going back to the Hegelian dialectic, you know, if they want to a certain outcome, which if it's like that dude, Mike Lee or whatever his name was, said about like kind of getting at the Antarctic resources, which, you know, again, there's every country is represented down there. They all have a claim stake down there, a stake claim. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's another, you know, whole life study to be, you know, sometimes real quick, because, you know, the whole climate change, you know, with certain entities trying to propagate ecology and stuff, and maybe they had proper grassroots or whatever, and you look at the John Muirs, and yeah, we had some exchanges on Facebook regarding him, and I had my kind of doubts on him, but it was just in regards to like the
Oh yeah.
cool quote that he had, and that it rings true to just like being more in tune and protecting nature and all this stuff. Yet whoever they were rubbing shoulders with back in the days, whatever the fuck, and whatever their philanthropy legacy was established on, and how it transpired throughout the decades, and how it might have been infiltrated, hijacked, whatever the fuck, right? So we have these things that are pro environment, yet what's kind of going on in the background sometimes, right? Because it's not all
Yeah.
fruits and
Well,
vegetables or whatever. Like,
well, I mean, and that guy Mir, he's like one of those old school environmentalists, and hey man, you have to judge people in context with their time, and they went after him, Sierra Club. People went after him because he's on record saying certain things, but those old school environmentalists, they were very much there was this, it's called social hygiene, or it's not depopulation, it's more like eugenics. Like that was that was considered sort of a more liberal, like that's considered a um that was an outlook that people took to what they thought was ending suffering. They thought that that eugenics program was, there's been a lot of people that we know that, I think James Clear, is it not James Clear, James what's his name, James True. He did a really good he did some really good early work, James True did, on some of these topics. When he dives into history, he does pretty good stuff. He did one about the eugenics movement and how it was, people looked at that like we hear that now, we're like, oh my gosh, that's, which you can make arguments in that and then they're, not to conflate a guy like Bill Gates and can I say Bill? I don't know if I can say that. And he comes from that, like his father was the partner of Margaret Sanger, so PP, and she was a eugenicist as well. And so Mir, he was of that mindset, and that was considered a liberal stance, because it was like, hey, we need to end people suffering, because there's a lot of poverty, and there's arguments to be made. Clearly, it's like a whole different thing now. So,
Well, we have assisted suicide, some legalized assisted
yeah.
suicide here in California and Oregon. That's
Plus
an
Canada,
interesting update. Yeah.
well, you seen what's going on in Canada, and it was like they're even pushing people, like they're trying to influence people in that direction in Canada. It's like, so yeah, it's kind of along those same lines, right? So let's get back to this real quick. I'm sorry, guys, for ranting. I get off on these tangents. HARP, an ionospheric research program, is run by the U.S. military, has frequently been linked to conspiracy theories. And I'm not putting my opinion. I'm just trying to do an analytical take on this regarding weather control and even mind control due to its capabilities of altering the Earth's atmosphere. So these concerns are tied into larger narratives about government secrecy, military black projects, and potential for using weather mod as a weapon of war or a tool of social control. And all this sort of data is going to really hit home when we kind of think about what's just recently happened. So from a psyops and propaganda perspective, the secrecy and controversial nature of geoengineering and HARP present opportunities for controlling narratives. So getting back to some of those vocabulary words I brought up, controlling narratives, manipulating public perception, and using the climate as a means of societal influence. So there's some themes that arise from an analysis of geoengineering through the lens of PSYOP. So we got controlling of the narrative. So you're framing it as an environmental necessity. So official narratives frame geoengineering as a necessary response to climate change. Oh, how convenient. Positioning it as a last resort to save humanity from environmental collapse. Suppressing opposition through misinformation. We're seeing a lot of, we haven't seen it yet, but I'm starting to see all the polarization happen with what happened down south. not that far from me, and there's a good chance that it will be. So suppressing opposition through misinformation. So any critical discussion of geoengineering, even though we have how many videos of the officials on record? What was the CIA director? What was his real famous video? I went to Casey. I think it was one of the other ones.
Gunderson?
Video.
No.
Ted well, Gunderson? He was on. He comes out and says it. He's like, oh, I mean, it's not even a question. They absolutely have the ability, But when it comes from a CIA guy that's CIA director, former, that's saying it in front of everyone. I mean, so any critical discussion of geoengineering, particularly its darker potential uses, often labeled as conspiracy theory, is not a very useful term to delegitimize any discussion. Again, going back to the framing the debate, the polarization. Hey, it's either this or that, and there's no gray area. There's no debate. So you just control the debate. So debate, suppression of opposition is a classic PSYOP technique. Let's see here. Appeal to authority and expertise. So the geoengineering, we heard this back in 2020. Trust the experts, trust the science, right? Appeal to authority, that's a basic fallacy, and expertise. So geoengineering narrative heavily relies on scientific experts and authoritative bodies such as the UN, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, Sustainable Goals, United Nations, or prestigious universities to lead credibility to these technologies. So what's the impact of weather manipulation? Well, a psychological impact, creating fear and dependency. Weather events, particularly extreme ones, and this is kind of what I was getting at before, like hurricanes, droughts, or floods, often create mass fear and chaos, which that's a normal human reaction. So if populations, this is what I said before, begin to believe that their governments or foreign adversaries can control these events, it fosters a sense of powerlessness and dependency. And this dynamic allows for greater social control as populations look to governments or international institutions for protection and solutions. Isn't that interesting? So weaponization of the weather, and this is something that's been talked about like back in the 40s. I mean, it's the idea that weather can be used as a weapon, such as inducing droughts in enemy territories or causing flooding, is key in key strategic areas. It's long been considered within military planning. So this is something, again, it's been known by the military. There's a lot of white papers out about that, kind of discussing this, going back to what Mike Lee said about the Air Force, like the Air Force. There's an actual white paper on the Air Force, from the Air Force, talking about how there was like a 1.8 degree change or change in the surface temperature caused by the blanket of cirrus clouds. That's enough to get at what they want to get at down south in Antarctica, which is what they got. That was a guy's argument. So it makes perfect sense. I mean, I had very little trouble. Like, he was really thorough. I'll try to link that. I'll have to go find that. It's a very good episode. Ray Carlwood, Fireside Chats. Mike Lee. I'm pretty sure his name is Mike Lee. Let's see here. So weaponization of weather, the idea that weather can be used as a weapon, such as inducing drought. I already went over that. So increased cognitive dissonance, the cognitive dissonance. So there you go with that term again. The scientific consensus presented by the media, coupled with the visible reality of severe weather events, creates cognitive dissonance in the public. On one hand, geoengineering is presented as a solution to environmental crisis, but on the other hand, suspicion of its military and political applications persists. So the tension being exploited in PSYOPs by fostering confusion and creating divided public opinion on the ethics and safety of geoengineering. So secrecy, military application, and covert ops. So geoengineering is a black project. So I'll go back to that term, black propaganda, black PSYOP. So many aspects of geoengineering, especially in its military application, remain classified or concealed under the guise of national security. So we know that there's actual white papers talking about geoengineering. So what I like to tell people about military technology is that what you're seeing out there in the real world is 50 years behind. In other words, we're starting to see like the laser technology, which you can go on to Lockheed Martin's website. They call it directed edge. They've had that for a long time. That's what kind of like organization that probably came out of the Operation Paperclip. Actually, I think they brought that over from Germany. but possibly, I'm not sure. But it's always if you know about it, then just rest assured that it's at least 50 years old technology. So the lack of transparency in these programs allows governments to conduct psyops by controlling the flow of information, thus managing public perception and quelling dissent. So covert use for military advantage. Weather mod has long been considered as a potential tool for military advantage. Cloud seeding, for example, has been used to influence weather conditions during wartime. Let's see here. Psychological manipulation through weather events. The public may not necessarily need to believe that weather is being deliberately modified to feel its psychological effects. Severe weather events already create fear, stress, and anxiety, which we know that. The mere suggestion that these events could be artificially engineered by a foreign power or one's own government amplifies these emotions, creating fertile ground for social control. Goes back to control, hearts and minds. Always going back to, again, that was the insignia I had, hearts, minds, deeds. That I had an insignia that we wore on a uniform. It said hearts, minds, deeds.
Shoot, what was the last thing you said? Oh yeah. So it seems like with that control of perception, it's like we're always pointing the finger, like, oh, it's their fault. They're trying to control the stuff, when it's kind of like the pot calling the kettle black and all that jazz. Do you see the comment posted down below? Are you familiar
What's
with
that?
the book of Dune? And as far as
Yeah.
projective programming and just allegories and that kind of stuff, and foretelling or even forewarning the public populace, through these mediums of books, literature, movies, television, whatever, that are
Yeah. You
a
know what?
little bit outside of the programming. Any insights to this comment or anything of the sort?
Yeah, you're familiar with that term. I guarantee you know what that term
Thank you,
is.
Mindhack, for the comments, by the way. Appreciate it. Yeah, go Ab. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's my buddy there. That's my buddy, Mindhack. What's up, bud?
Oh, cool.
What's the word that our good buddy, speaking of Canada, what's our good buddy up in Canada, the Scottish one? Do you remember him? You know what that is? The Canadian Scot who always talked like this. I know, Leslie, you know who this is. Tell me who this is. He was doing all of the, he was the guy that did all the commentary before. I'm kind of like trying to get your help here because I'm blanking on it too.
John?
I know who it is. No, it's the old. He used to always give his commentary. He was talking about the controllers. He was like quote Alex Jones, which I don't even get to that guy, but Watt? What was his name?
Alan Watts?
Something Watt. Was it? It was Alan Watt. Yeah.
Okay, was
He's
he
the one.
Scottish?
I don't know
Okay,
if
I know very few Scotsmen, but anyways, go for it. Yeah.
No, yeah, he's actually from Scotland. He's from
Okay,
Scotland. He moved
Irish
to
or
Canada.
English? Yeah, fuck.
Yeah,
Anyway.
he's got that real interesting accent. But he predictive programming is what you're talking about, Derek. And I know that term was on the tip of your tongue.
No.
Predictive
Like,
programming.
I'm too familiar with that term, but I feel like I'm trying to flip the script on that word because it seems more projective programming. Because what are they predicting? What's the definition of predicting? It almost
Maybe that's a better way to frame it.
Yeah. I'm
That's
trying to
probably
frame
a better
it
way
in a
to frame
more accurate way, but it's all the same in the end. I'm not trying to get into semantics to get caught up on that. But
No, absolutely. No, if
they're in
you're
the
like,
know, so they're not guessing. They know what the fuck's up. They're just trying to seed the
yeah,
public
to a
consciousness.
certain extent. I
Like
mean, there's a certain
1984
outcome.
and
Like the Simpsons.
Well, there's a certain
they did
outcome.
another one. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go there.
No, Leslie, yeah.
Go there. Go ahead.
well, I mean, there's a lot of shows like The Simpsons, like 1984. The books and different things that people find that are predicting like things like 9/11 or wars. And what's your theory on that?
Well, I mean, like going back to what we were saying, it's like they have it. It's the Hegelian dialectic. They have a desired outcome they want. That doesn't mean they're going to get it, but they might get something close to it. You know what I mean? And projected programming. So I think that's basically what Derek was saying, which is like they can't actually, like going back to what we were saying before, you can't, at the end of the day, unless you have a biological, unless you like, there's technology to control people via technology, and you're tapping into their brain. That's the Delgado did that with the bull. So this was back in the 70s. They had the technology. If I was saying like nanotech really freaks me out because once persuasion moves out of the realm of psychology, moves into the realm of biology, that's something that scares the shit out of me. And if Delgado was doing that back in the 70s and 80s, and again, there's that famous video where they're like radio controlled or remote controlled, controlling the bull to stop them charging. And then it's a really uncanny visual where the bull's just running in circles. That they were controlling that, and they had that technology back then. So when influence and propaganda moves out of the realm of PSYOP propaganda moves out of that realm and it moves into the, and I think this is where they're going. I really do. And this is what, at that point, if things go in that direction, it's like, well, what can you do? I mean, we'll be like the Matrix pulling the thing out of our skin or something. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
There's a fine line.
Sorry.
Fine line
Sorry?
between psychology. There's a fine line between psychology and biology. They're really not separate. So I think that when you're looking at whether it's trauma or harmonics,
Yeah, that's right. The body keeps the score. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yep.
it's like pushing things to that level that
Yep.
takes it out of conscious choice into a biological reaction that then becomes manipulatable, outside of a
Good point.
person's will to some extent,
That
So-
includes a lot of like that's basically predisposed, or that's like dependent upon trauma, though, right? That's essentially how that works.
That's one way, right? And I
Or the
understand that
physical.
like they've gone even beyond just repeated traumatization to like harmonic type of controls and other
yeah.
types of manipulation of people, right?
Yeah. Well, sound. They have sound weapons. They definitely have sound weapons. So if it can, if it can cause physical sort of trauma, it could probably, obviously. And we hear a lot about the quote, the stalking, the stalking thing. I don't know what the actual word is. A lot of people claim to be sort of being manipulated through
digital stalking or targeted individual, that kind of shit, or whatever.
Yeah.
There's
And I
like
met somebody that,
group. Oh God, there's another term I've heard, where people are claiming that
gang stalking. Sorry.
Gang stalking. Yes.
There's that, and then there's, like you said, there's the targeted individual stuff where I had a friend that, I mean, there's no reason. I mean, he excuse me, he claimed to be targeted individual.
Damn.
And
yeah, so
there's no reason for me to.
You're talking about Jose Delgado, that did the mechanical bull that kind of, controlled the bull.
Sorry.
So good. Gesundheit, as we were saying. Health. So yeah, what he did, a radio controlled bull that, and obviously
he
that's
tapped
just
into the
one little thing that one person did amongst, how many other people that did whatever the fuck, between then and now, right? And you're talking about
exactly.
And I've been keeping up this in mind for years and years, and I had to question myself, like, geez, is it really true? Like, these motherfuckers behind the scenes, they're really 50 years ahead of all this shit right now in the public. Like, what the fuck are
that's
they
just
doing
my
behind?
term. I mean,
yeah.
That's just my that's my estimation. That's just a little figure I use, but it could be give or
it's
take.
not far
whatever,
off the mark,
depending.
because you're not the only one I heard it from, right? Yeah. So,
well, nanotech and that's a whole other can of that's a whole other topic. But my thought is, and this is just kind of my own gut sort of intuitive thought, is that why this is persuasion and propaganda and like Leslie said, of course, I mean, we're talking about extreme, not just extreme, but trauma. Absolutely, that's part of the way that you can control people, or I'm not control, but influence people in a certain way. And when you talk about, it's like if you're have all this technology and money at your access, and you're a bad individual, like, wouldn't you think to yourself, hey, instead of like spending all this time and sort of hit or miss effort in influencing people in the way we want, now let's just figure out the technology to use to control exactly what we want them to do. And that's why I'm very like, and this is kind of the issue I got with Elon when he's promoting the technology, and he might just be promoting that technology. You can't just assume that I have my own opinion, but I know I can't just assume that like that brain chip technology is just, I kind of go somewhere where I'm like, no. But then it's like he presents it as, hey, this is a way to advance humanity and to develop. I'm like, no, I don't want no part of that, because I'm like, if that technology gets into the wrong hands, like what we're talking about, and I'm not saying either way Elon is this or that. Like I said, a lot of the technology that he has his name on, I have a big problem with, because I call it slave tech 2.0. Talking about digital money, PayPal. We're talking about electric cars, which that's just controlling people's movement, and you have to plug into the grid anyway. And when we talk about brain chips, we talk about the satellite rocket program. It's like that's just dropping satellites for what I consider to be mass surveillance. So I have a real problem with a lot of this. Like, I'm not even sure exactly, but again, who knows? So yeah. Anyway, I'll get back to this real quick. So social engineering through environmental crisis. So the fear of environmental collapse exacerbated by media coverage of climate disasters and extreme weather events primes the public to accept drastic measures like geoengineering. From a science perspective, the strategy of problem reaction solution Hegelian dialectic allows governments and corporations to introduce controversial technologies under the guise of solving a crisis, all while expanding their control over global resources, including the weather itself. So it goes back to the 2020 event. There was a Hegelian dialectic there to where, you had one side, the sides were being polarized, and then the middle, it's like, well, here's what we can do to solve the problem. Digital passports, digital currency, yada, yada, yada. Hegelian dialectic in practice. So, let's see here. Psychological manipulation to weather events. Did we go over that? Public may not necessarily need to believe. Okay, we went over that. So this was just social engineering through environment. We got that. So geoengineering and HARP represent a convergence of technology, military strategy, and psychological operations. And the ability to manipulate the weather, whether for environmental purposes or covert military operations, offers immense power to those who control it by managing the public narrative around geoengineering and discrediting opposition. So governments and corporations can maintain control over these controversial technologies, using them not only to address environmental issues, but also as tools for geopolitical influence and social control.
Damn, man.
Give me a second. Give me a second, guys.
Yeah, no
Real
worries.
quick.
All right.
Let me, I'll be here for a minute.
Do your thing.
How do I?
I'll ask you afterwards, but this sounds so much more.
Give me 1 minute. I'll be right back.
Yeah, we're gonna keep it flowing while you're doing the thing. No worries.
Sounds good. I'm gonna hit that bathroom real quick. All right, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we all human here.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is fascinating. I appreciate how he is really shedding light on these events with the strategies, right? And my view is like we should know these strategies, and we should be careful that we're not participating in them.
That's really why I wanted to have this conversation, right? And because we see this being played out on Facebook pretty much on a daily basis with whatever, right? People posting memes and not really understanding the whole meaning behind whatever's being portrayed behind them sometimes. And yeah, it's just it can be a shit show quite easily when people haven't done their due diligence and they're just kind of regurgitating, what they kind of seen, and with the confirmation biases attached and all that jazz, to whatever degree of truth that might be entailed in those things. It's like it's not a black and
Right.
white issue a lot of times. Sometimes.
Yeah. And I think, he's highlighting a lot of points that we've made throughout our various shows, about the importance of kind of knowing thyself and being very aware of what's driving your own consciousness. Is it conscious or is it unconscious? Is it emotional? Is it logical? Are you using critical thinking? Are you using the trivium? So, wherever we are in trying to influence, right, like on social media or with our own websites or so forth, we want to be very conscious of our own use of these techniques, right, that then I think end up delegitimizing our concepts, so being principle based, to me is the most important thing, coming back to principle, being clear on what we know to be true versus what we are assuming or believe, right? Sorting out the difference between belief and real knowing, because I think we want to value the truth and not just try to emotionally manipulate people. We have choices to make in our own marketing, right? Yeah.
Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah,
Oh, it's
no
okay.
worries.
Yeah, we're cool.
All right, so to bring us back
We
to
good?
speed, yeah, for sure. So what you were just talking about, it really reminded me of things of the nature of I'm sure you've read was it Dr. Coleman's Community 300, or and I want to ask you even just the validity of the Iron Mountain Report document. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Oh shit, you're frozen. Oh no, you're good. You're back. You heard about that? The Iron Mountain Report?
Back. Yeah,
Because they
Coleman.
speak about weather is, like, so, all the elitists that are been so used to and comfortable over, making money off of the wartime, they're looking into the future like, okay, yeah, like humanity, we want them to evolve and be in some kind of peaceful time. But how are we going to profit off of that, when we're so used to profiting off of the war because we're funding both sides or all sides or whatever the fuck, right? So one of those things was like weather warfare or like these, man-made, quote unquote, natural disasters, right? So how does that play into what you were just talking about? Because it seems that's just goes hand in hand. It's just been written, from different hands, from different ages and
Well,
times.
if you think about going back to Julian Huxley, Aldous Huxley, their father, who was, of course, Aldous Huxley was the writer of Brave New World, which I believe is a very, I think it's a sort of a blueprint. I think he was privy to some of these quote plans, and I think that's what Brave New World. We're not really moving into 1984. That was attempted. I think 1984 was basically the Soviet. That's the communist, like sort of the Soviet Union model, which doesn't really work that well. And I think that the Brave New World model, while and everything's subject to. I mean, one thing people need to understand is that like these planners, these groups, it's like there's always opposition. Like I said, not every billionaire is an evil. There's people actually in opposition to it. Like one of the big black pills that I see that needs to probably be left behind is that this idea that whether it be World Economic Forum, which Klaus Schwab, he's just a spokesperson. He's not really anybody that important in terms of like he's out there. Anybody that's done public relations, even Bill Gates, it's like they're not that important in terms of like they're doing public relations. So I think that back in the day that the idea behind overpopulation. They've been promoting that since like the 1800s, man. It's like middle 1800s, and it's like, and there was some weird statistic I read, like, all the people in the world could have like an acre of land in Texas or something like that. And it's like, if you've ever flown long distances, you'll see this vast tracts of land. There's nobody there. But that population, and this goes back to, like you said earlier, you mentioned that what was the group that you mentioned before? They were promoting
Club of Rome, Committee of 300.
Club of Rome.
Club of Rome. That's also
Club of Rome.
John
So
Coleman.
this overpopulation, this whole thing has been a outward, like we were just talking, what I just brought up. There's this outward, well, it's the Hegel. It always goes back to Hegelian dialectic, and they're presenting the problem, and partially they're creating the problem. They might be influencing people to believe that it is the problem, and maybe with like what we're talking about geoengineering, maybe they're creating a problem in terms of they can influence the weather, and it's like, well, we need to do X, Y, Z in order to solve this problem. It's like, and at the end of the day, more power is being gained by these people. And it's like, I just you just have to keep in mind that like not everybody that has influence is on team evil. Like there's people out there, and that's kind of that one stream I sent you. That's the point he was making. It's like not everybody's. It's hard to, us kind of looking at it. It's like, we look at some of these individuals and how they're presented by. Now, we don't know these people. We don't really know, but it's like, again, going back to that thing we started off with, like there's a spectrum. Like there ain't this or that. It's like there's a spectrum in between. There's degrees of the thing, So polarization is always going to be present when there's some sort of psyop or propaganda. Because when you see polarization taking shape, it's a pretty good assumption. It's a pretty good, I guess, rule of thumb especially when it becomes like a very popular topic that it's being manipulated, because again, going back to natural law, it's like, where do you see this or that? It's like this thing or that thing. It's like, I mean, I'm not talking about like sexes and stuff like that. I'm talking about like there's spectrums of truth. There's always gray area. I mean, there is truth, don't get me wrong, but then it's like, you understand what I'm saying? It's like there's this
like
polarization.
Perspectives kind of
It's this or that. Red team, blue team. It's left, right. It's and then they just move it to wherever they want, and that's the Overton window. So that's basically. And I just kind of dove into like I just did that just because of what happened recently, and so from the PSYOP perspective, that's, I'm not trying to insinuate that like people in the I mean, it's one of those topics where it's like just being aware of what the capability is. Like the capability's there, and it's like it's not even a question. I mean, now how it's going to be used to manipulate people, it's like, hey man, we have that capability, and we're just going to do this one thing real quick, and now from now on we don't really, kind of like some of the events that we see that have a whole bunch of it's presented, these events happen. I'm just going to say events. And it's like presented to the public as a certain thing, and then people start looking. Let's say JFK assassination. That's the very first one in terms of like popular American culture. It was presented as, and that's where the term conspiracy theory came from, as far as I could tell. And that was it's presented in a very particular way. But then when you start looking into it, it's like, well, wait a second. And then there's all these other angles, and then before you know it, there's influencers involved trying to steer it one way or the other, and here's the acceptable, and everybody knows that was a conspiracy. So just by the basic definition of conspiracy, which is what, two or more people coming together to conspire. I mean, that's all the time. Like we're conspiring right now. So all of a sudden it's like, hey man, we're going to control the dialogue of the JFK assassination. We're going to present. At some point, though, it goes back to that saturation that we talked about, the information saturation, to where you can't, there's so many different angles to where it's like, well, shit, and then you're just like, forget about it, because it's like, we know something. It wasn't what they told us, So anyway, there's that. So I went into that. You guys were, I don't know how long have we been going. I would really like to go into the quotes and some of the book. Like I can do that real quick if you want to do that.
Yeah, we've been going about 2 hours and 25 minutes. So
All right. And I apologize for going off on these tangents.
yeah, no, these are such big topics. Like a whole show could be on each one.
Yeah, we could do it's part
Good.
3, 4, whatever is good with you.
Yeah,
man.
absolutely, man. Absolutely. Leslie and Derek, absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm
we
down.
definitely want. You can definitely finish up this last bit you wanted to do, and we can wrap
with
it
your
up. And
quotes and books. I think it'd be
Let's do
good.
quotes and books, and we'll keep some of these case studies for next time. And then, of course, next time I want to add some more stuff to it. So,
including Dianetics. No. Just
hey,
kidding.
man, that's a good subject. Going into
It's a
Parsons.
pretty cool subject, honestly.
Well, I mean, like, hey, man, where'd the UFO? Okay, let's talk about we're talking about the UFO thing, right? Aren't we? Like that was all like wasn't I'm pretty sure quite a bit of the Parsons and Hilbert, like Hubbard was he was his partner or his good friend, and who did like um, who was the guy Aleister Crowley. Like I don't know how much he had to do with that, but I think those guys didn't that whole UFO alien thing isn't that kind of where it originated from? I mean, in terms of modern culture, like modern. That's a good subject to look into. I might go ahead and do that actually. So, I'm not for sure about that. I think that's where the modern sort of.
I was trying to be coy or cute.
No, that's a great study, but is the UFO not one of the biggest? Is that not one of the biggest, most divisive, most? I mean, the mainstream media has been pushing that for how long? I mean, and now, even recently, it was like all these reveals coming from these high-ranking. The Air Force was promoting it. Tucker Carlson was promoting it. Tucker Carlson, he's got a lot of influence. So what's that? I mean, he can influence people. I mean, all these mainstream people, it's like they're connected in some way. Not saying they're malevolent. I'm just saying that just understand that they're the ones who are kind of creating the field of play, right?
We're looking at
And
the
then
chessboard, and who are the players on the chessboard, almost amongst the pawns, in a sense, right?
yeah, who created the chessboard? Who's tabled it on? Who's placing? We're all kind of players. We're all kind of pieces. I mean, in the way they're looking at it. I don't mean like literally, like
Right. Yeah, that's what it meant.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, absolutely. And what we're doing right now, what you guys do all the time, you're trying to break free from that, being that chess player. I mean, that chess piece.
Indeed.
Which that's what we're all. Just what all the people I associate with. That's generally speaking. That's kind of, especially in media. That's kind of where they're coming from. We all do it in a different way, All right, so I got shaping minds and then controlling opinion. I put these this list of books together. So it's insights from 13 key texts. PSYOP, and I think I was going to do some cyber warfare, but I'll leave that for some other time because that's kind of where I see the hybrid of the PSYOP and the propaganda field. It's merging with cyber warfare. That's a whole different topic. And then we might go into Delgado next. I might look into him and see. Kind of explore that area there with what we were talking about before.
Yeah, him and that whole cyber thing. That would be a great show.
Cyber warfare is
fuck
that's the future of PSYOP, I think. Because everything's done basically, with the exception of the holographic, blue beam stuff.
Yeah, fuck.
Actually, I'll bring up blue beam because I think there's a lot of PSYOP there too. Because it becomes such a popular. It's an archetype at this point. It's a meme. So we can look at memes as forms of archetypes, really. So blue beam's an archetype at this point. And whenever I see that, I'm like, what's that old quote? I got one of these quotes about how repeating a lie so big that it can't be denied.
Yeah, the Russian guy, I think. Anyways. Or a
Um,
German, Goebbels. I don't know.
yeah,
Doesn't
yep,
matter.
I believe so. Yeah, I mean that's one issue with some of these quotes. It's like you never know where they come from. So um, so this is 13 key texts. So the first one is I would recommend reader or listeners go check some of these books out. Engineering of Consent. That's Bernays, 1955. So it's an essay, and Bernays, and many of these books are available. Everybody that we know should know. Archive.com has quite a bit. Try to get the PDF and just to get some, you know, uh, get some sort of effort towards some of these books at least. But I would always recommend buying real books because before we know it, these books are going to disappear. They're not going to be accessible. That's kind of the plan, I think. But the Engineering of Consent. So this is Bernays builds upon his earlier work, Propaganda, which is one of the go-to books. I have that sitting over there actually. To explore how mass psychology and public relations can be used. So mass psychology and public relations. So remember, I keep bringing up that comparison between two sides of the same coin. You got propaganda on one side, you have marketing, advertising. And this is largely from kind of Bernays. He basically he was a master of both. And it's two sides of the same coin, it really is. Excuse me. So he introduces the concept that those in power can guide public behavior by understanding the psychological triggers of the masses. Triggers. That's interesting. What do you think triggers? What do you think that would be? Fear.
Fear of dying, fear of your
Hearts,
children.
minds,
Yeah.
hearts and minds. Hearts and minds. So the second one is manufacturing consent, which we talked about, the political economy of the mass media. This is Ed Herman and Noam Chomsky, and this is 1988. I was 10 years old when this book was written, and I recall reading this back in high school as well. So Herman and Chomsky, excuse me, introduced the propaganda model, which demonstrates how corporate-owned mass media serves the interest of elites by framing news to align with government and corporate agendas. And then, again, Noam Chomsky, he's pretty well known to be on the left, and he's got a very particular, but he does a lot of good work with linguistics, and much of his work was built my foundation, back when I was in 6th grade listening to Public Enemy, and this was, heck man, this was back in, I graduated in 96. I was rocking out the Public Enemy shirt back in 6th grade. And I can't, what year was that? I don't even know. But that started my progression towards, Noam Chomsky eventually, and then learned what I needed from him, and, moved on. Anyway, Public Opinion by Walter Lippmann. Lippmann argues that individuals form opinions based on simplified images or stereotypes, excuse me, making them vulnerable to manipulation. So simplified image or stereotypes. So remember how we discussed symbols, archetypal symbols, same thing. And this is a marketing book basically. So Public Opinion, that's more of a marketing book than propaganda book, I think. But this is the third. This was written in 1922. And he's talking about individuals form opinions based on simplified images or stereotypes. So if he knows that, if they know that, then isn't that going to dictate how they message if they're hitting their target audience? So 1922, making them vulnerable to manipulation by those who control media narratives. His examination of the pictures in our heads emphasizes the role of media in shaping perceptions that are detached from complex realities. Framing the narrative. How many times have we said that? And all this stuff is, you go over it enough, it's like you start to see the patterns, And again, it's all just deception. It really is manipulation. Muddying the waters, The Crowd, a study of the popular mind. This is 1895. This is a very real classic. This is Gustave Le Bon, Frenchman. Laban's pioneering study of crowd psychology reveals how individuals become irrational and emotionally driven when part of a group. This goes back to 2020 event. His exploration of how, and this is back 1895, his exploration of how crowds can be easily swayed by emotional appeals is critical for PSYOP practitioners who aim to manipulate group dynamics for political or military ends. 1895. Think about it. I mean, people were writing about this back then. People were writing about propaganda PSYOP back in 1895. And that's a big important book. So the fifth one is propaganda, and that's the formation of men's attitudes. That's Jacques Ellul, Ellul. It's 1965, and he offers a comprehensive analysis of how modern propaganda infiltrates all aspects of life: advertising, marketing, influencing not just political opinions, but also everyday behaviors and societal norms. So as I'm reading this, I mean, it's clear. Like, there is no differentiation. I mean, it's marketing, propaganda. It's just different in its approach in terms of, it's different in the, I guess you would say, the, I don't know, outcome, I guess. His work is essential for understanding how propaganda shapes the subconscious attitudes of populations, making them passive recipients of influence. Number 6, the psychology of influence and persuasion. This is Robert Cialdini, 1984. And he identifies 6 principles of influence: reciprocity, commitment, social proof, authority, social proof. What was one of the terms we brought up earlier? PSYOP terms. Remember? Virtue signaling, social proof. Authority, liking, and scarcity. That explain how people can be persuaded in everyday situations. His insights are directly applicable to PSYOPs and propaganda strategies, as understanding how individuals make decisions allows excuse me, propagandists to craft more effective messaging. And by the way, when I was in PSYOP getting trained, we used the term target audience. That's the same term that you would use in marketing or advertising. War on the Mind is the number. Sorry?
What was that book that you just mentioned again? The Psychology of Influence
And Persuasion.
and Persuasion.
And that's by Robert Cialdini, so Cialdini, and that was 1984. It was written in 1984. How about that? Number 7, War on the Mind: the military uses and abuses of psychology. This is Peter Watson, 1978, my birth year. Watson explores how psychological techniques have been employed by military, particularly during the Cold War, but to manipulate both soldiers and civilians. His investigation of PSYOPs, mind control, and psychological warfare provide historical context for how these methods have evolved in modern warfare strategies. So it's more from a sort of warfare tactical. That's more for people who are interested in how what I did kind of was applied. Not that I did all the things, and I'm just saying what I was trained to do, kind of. So it's more of a military application. PSYOP being applied by different. It has different what CIA does, versus what military does versus what Rand Corporation does. Those are different approaches clearly, and what capability and capacity. So here's number 8, amusing ourselves to death. That's public discourse, amusing ourselves to death, public discourse in the age of show business. So this is more looking at the entertainment industry, pop culture. This is by Neil Postman. This is 1985. And he argues that TV and mass media have reduced public discourse to entertainment, prioritizing emotional and superficial content over reasoned debate. Framing the debate, framing the discussion, framing the narrative. That goes back to that tactic we've talked about. I don't know, we've repeated 20 times now. Framing the narrative. Pop culture is really good at that. If you want to influence hearts and minds, guess what? Music, movies, like you were talking about earlier, Derek.
Poop culture? What?
Pop culture? Yeah, exactly.
Like Mario West, good friend of ours.
Poop culture.
He says that. Yeah.
Poop culture. Yeah, that's that pretty much sums it up. Because it's not really. It's yeah, yeah. His and honestly, it's like these people understand culture as a topic, as a subject, and they understand how to influence it. And culture, cult is really just like a short word for culture. And you got certain defining, people use the word cult. It's like they don't understand it. It's culture, and it has a negative connotation, but it's like people that you got to understand people's beliefs, their behaviors. This is how you influence people. And you can create culture creators. You've heard that term. Well, what is poop culture? What is pop culture? Culture creators, right? I mean, because we're talking about public, like back in the day when hip hop used to be, it was a conscientious thing as opposed to all of a sudden gangster rap comes around, NWA, and a lot of people, I was listening to them back in 5th grade, man. And for real. And and because we were exposed, that was, during my, I'm Gen X, and it's like, that's when that first popped up. And then we've seen all the stuff that's happening now in the hip hop world. And back in the day, there's a lot of connections between CIA, you have the Highway Ricky Ross situation with the, the introduction of, the crack cocaine into the certain areas and neighborhoods. And this was where the reporter was, suicided. CIA. And that's, that was part of that whole gangster rap culture, man. And do you remember the sort of making fun of that remember that movie CB4 that was kind of making fun of
With Chris
NWA?
Rock, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This was back when I actually watched movies, man. Yeah, they were kind of making fun of that, like they were kind of showing it to be a concoction. It was not like like American Idol style now, where everything it was the same up until a certain point, where most of the time it's just created characters. So, and these people understand that pop culture influences more, not just, it's not the pop culture, it's the music. They take music and cinema and television and they manipulate it in the way they want because they understand how powerful it is. I mean, it's that old ancient, like the drama and the comedy, the tragedy and hope,
Yeah, and I mentioned this in a couple shows before, even with the Corey Angelet, with the Freedom Summit. The second one's coming up in like a week. That's cool. I mentioned the whole fact that, like these controllers and stuff, they're trying to recruit the best and the brightest and the most talented to be those, people to, give the most shine and attraction to these things to kind of have that manipulation.
Yeah. And then it's this.
Voila. Yeah.
Right? And it's like, hey, we're going to elevate you to God status, but you have to sign on that dotted line. Sell, like Bob Dylan said, sell your soul to the devil. The crossroads. I mean, they were talking. I mean, what does that mean? We see a lot happening recently with like some of that, and like it's saturation with the Diddy thing, but it's like, I mean, anybody that thinks pop culture or any sort of like, it's like, and didn't like American Idol kind of show everybody that stars are made or created? Isn't that what that was all about? That's what I took that as. That's what I was like, oh, they're revealing. It's called what's the term for that? It's not really a SAP term, but it's called revelation of the method.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hidden in plain
There's
sight.
recruiters for everything right now.
Yeah. So number 8, amusing ourselves to death. Wait, already. Okay, so he argued. I went over that. So number 9 was the rape of the mind. That's a great title. A little over the top there, but the psychology of thought control, menticide, and brainwashing. And this is from I believe it's a Dutch guy. That's Joost, Joost Meerloo, Meerloo, and this is 1956. That's called the rape of the mind. That tells you exactly what he's thinking about this topic. It's the psychology of thought control. It's literally he's comparing it to rape, menticide, and brainwashing. Menticide. That's a pretty. I don't think I've ever heard that term. killing your mind. It's an exploration of brainwashing techniques used by totalitarian regimes. It's crucial for understanding the darker application of PSYOPs. That probably was kind of in the realm of MK Ultra. He delves into how fear, indoctrination, and isolation. So this is grooming. This sounds like grooming gangs, right? He delves into how fear, indoctrination, and isolation with the incorporation of like severe physical trauma and the drugs, forced drugging. That's a whole messed up situation there. Isolation can break down individual resistance. So he's saying here that my contention was always from that man search for meaning, which is you can do all these terrible things to people, but on some level that it's still almost impossible to control a person, because you can't really control it. You can't. This is kind of what I was getting at with the Aquino quote when he was talking about the culture. His point was, whether or not he was involved, what you said, his point was that at the end of the day, MK Ultra was a failure because you can't really force anybody. You can't really control people's mind in that way, because at the end of the day, they have free will, whatever you want to call it. And at the end of the day, they're going to choose to do what they choose to do. And so his contention was, that it was silly waste of time. You can influence people to do what you want, but like I said earlier, that's like, that's sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, no matter what. When they get, kind of like what we're talking about, when they get to the biological Delgado stuff, then that egg is cooked, and it's like there ain't much unless you can literally do the matrix thing, and that's just a whole bunch of speculation, but we'll get into that some other time.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot more people are waking up from, that splitting of their minds, than they ever planned on too. People are growing
there's
older, realizing.
I'm never going to discount the ability of psychological influence and manipulation, for sure. I do think there's a line there where it's like once you start crossing over into some of the things we're talking about, like that's kind of a no man. That's a point of no return, and that's that's almost biblical, and we've heard about these things throughout history. So hey, that's kind of interesting. Let's go to number 10, Dark Persuasion, A History of Brainwashing from Pavlov to Social Media. So we've all heard of Pavlov. That's by Joel Dimsdale. It's 2021, so more recent. And he traces the history of brainwashing techniques. That's there you go. That's a whole show right there. Brainwashing techniques from early experiments of Ivan Pavlov to the modern Pavlovian dogs, using the noise and the hunger. And I don't know if it was shock treatment. I think it was just noise. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, it's just the bell.
Yep.
And all that stuff, and like the salivation.
The school bell.
Right.
Sorry, Leslie. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In combination with their hunger, though, and their desire to eat, right?
Hearts and minds. So he traces the history. Okay.
Guts.
What's that?
And guts, I guess. With that
Absolutely.
hunger. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a deep guttural feeling for sure. His work is critical for understanding how psychological manipulation has evolved. And it's just a list of books I put together. I thought was what I thought was the sort of the best for people to kind of look into if they want to understand PSYOP propaganda. And some of them more, it's a spectrum. So his work is critical for this book was critical for understanding how psychological manipulation has evolved, particularly through digital platforms, which that's very important for us today. It's still important to understand the foundation of the grammar, the grammar, the trivium aspect of grammar. The Power Elite by C. Wright Mills, and this is 1956. Now I'm just going to point out, I'll make a point here. These books that were written, more than 50, 100 years ago, probably a good idea to read those, because nothing's new under the sun, as the saying goes, right? And what you'll see, like I said before, it's like we're just talking about deception here. This ain't rocket science, And there's just a million different ways there's a million different degrees between that, but it's all deception, really. So this book is he examines how a small. It's kind of like the book you just brought up. The what is it? The who's the English guy you brought up, Derek?
Dr. Coleman, Club of Rome,
Yeah, Coleman.
Committee
So
300.
Power Elite. It sounds like it's kind of it's sort of in that frame. He examines how a small group of elites control the major institution of power in the United States, including the military, corporate, and political spheres. We all know that. He argues that these elites use their control of media and propaganda to shape public opinion and maintain their dominance. This is back in '56. CIA and the Cult of Intelligence. This is Victor Marchetti, John Marks, 1974. So Marchetti and Marks exposed the covert operations of the CIA. This is probably a spicy one, including its use of psyops and propaganda to manipulate global political events. False flags, anyone? This book provides a detailed look at how intelligence agencies use psychological warfare to control narratives of public perception. See, like I was saying before, PSYOP and propaganda, PSYOP especially, there's different formats and there's different angles and there's different organizations, and depending upon how it's the organization and what they're actually trying to do, public, private sector. I mean, it's just a nonstop saturation of propaganda and influence and manipulation. The CIA and okay, we got that one. So number 13, Mind War, Michael Aquino, and this was 1980. And again, just need to emphasize, like when I listened to him talk about like his pedigree, like the things he was involved with. Again, he did PSYOP, just like we had the same MOS. So he was a 37 Foxtrot, I was a 37 Foxtrot, that's PSYOP specialist. The things that he talked about, I was able to vet everything he said about, like when he started talking about the military stuff, like I knew he was on point. But then he started talking about things and I'm like, oh, he was involved with some shit. So that's why I think it's really important not underestimate Mind War, and it's free. It's free. I actually I shared that PDF on that Minds Under Influence group on Facebook. So he's a key figure in the development of psychological operations. So he's he kind of set the stage for it. He's like a founding father, if you will, within the U.S. military. And he outlines the concept of mind war, where psychological operations are used not to influence enemy forces, but to manipulate the perceptions. Oh, I'm sorry, not just to influence enemy forces, but to manipulate perceptions of civilian populations on a global scale. And he argues that modern warfare should prioritize psychological influence over physical destruction. That's kind of what I was getting at before, which that doesn't really align with what we were told about the guy. Not saying that you're not, Leslie, what you're saying. I'm not debating that. It might very well be true, but that was something that I seen pretty consistent in his interviews when I was trying to get at the interviews with just the PSYOP stuff. And so mind war is essential for understanding the evolution of psychological warfare in the digital age. He was talking about things way back, a while back that are now like reality. So that's definitely worth looking into. Leslie, if you check out the on that Facebook group, it's one of the files I dropped in there. It's on archive too. Let's see. So that was number 13. I think that's all I got there. Yep. That's all the books I picked out. I think that are probably best for people to, or at least a good foundational study. And then how about some quotes, and then we'll wrap it up if that sounds good, because I think I'm about ready. Yep.
Time to eat.
Absolutely. All right. So top 10 quotes. So all the world's a stage, and all the men and women are merely players. That's Shakespeare. And that's basically, it's highlighting the idea that much of what we perceive as reality is performance. It's just pretty self-explanatory. I think everybody knows that one. Number 2, the conscious and intelligent manipulate. This is a big one. This is Bernays. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits. The conscious and intelligent manipulation. So that's showing that there's people behind it. conscientiously and intelligently manipulating, very important, of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Democratic society. He's regarded as the father of public relations, captures the essence of, and we all kind of understand what democratic society, it's, the machinations of that, right? Which is very important. When you listen to Bernays, you got to understand he's speaking from the perspective of he knows how things really work. I'm gonna wrap this up, Derek. My man Derek, he's probably what, 3 o'clock over there. Bernays he's got such a work ethic, man. Props to you, but constantly hustling. Bernays is coming from the perspective of he knows how things really work. He's presenting these, the way he writes, though, it's like he's presenting it in a palatable way. Very important figure. This quote underscores deliberate and strategic efforts to shape public opinion, revealing how democracy can be influenced through manipulation of mass perceptions. So democracy is all about deception, influence, mob rule. It's oligarchical in nature and actuality. Whoever controls the media controls the mind. That's Jim Morrison. Now, that's attributed to him. I could see him saying that. And if he was involved with what we're talking about, strange scenes at Laurel Canyon, like his father was he was the admiral at the Gulf of Tonkin, which is what kicked off the Vietnam War, which is said to be a false flag. That's his father. That's Jim Morrison's father, and he was involved with that strange scenes at Laurel Canyon. I would recommend everybody check that out too. David McGowan wrote that. That's probably an archive too, and that talks about how most of the hippie, the influential artists and stuff, they were involved in an operation. In wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be attended to a bodyguard of lies. Winston Churchill, one of the most effective propagandists in history. So his insight into the use of deception during warfare perfectly encapsulates the role of Psyops propaganda. His insight into the use of deception, isn't that interesting? Number 5, none are more hopelessly, and these are just some random quotes I put together, by the way. These are just what I think are good ones that kind of encapsulate the whole thing we talked about. So none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. That's Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. And he's talking about the invisible chains of psychological manipulation. And psyops of propaganda operate by creating illusions of freedom and choice while subtly guiding behavior and thought. Voting. Does anyone have faith in that process? I don't know. I don't think so. Seems like they do, but it's like they were kind of showing people that they shouldn't. All right. If you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes a truth. Joseph Goebbels. Number 7, it is easier to, this is the Mark Twain quote, Derek, that I was thinking of earlier. I couldn't quite recite. It is easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. Mark Twain. He was actually really good friends with Tesla, which I think people should look into. A lot of people think Tesla's a psyop, but I don't think so. There's some interesting stuff, back and forth communication between Mark Twain and Tesla. I would recommend people checking that out. Fascinating. So, let's see here. Dostoevsky, Fyodor Dostoevsky. I always have trouble with this. Dostoevsky, even though my name's kind of like in that, my family's from that area, the region. The best way to keep a prisoner from escaping is to make sure he never knows he's in prison. There you go. In our age, it's number 9. In our age, there is no such thing as keeping out of politics. All issues are political issues, and politics itself is a mass of lies, evasions, folly, hatred, and schizophrenia. Real quick, we brought his book up before. Can you guess who that is? 1984. That's Mr. Orwell. And I think George Orwell that's his pen name. I think his mentor was Aldous Huxley. And isn't it interesting how those two views, 1984 versus Brave New World, kind of represent the old sort of Soviet system versus the new, the capitalism versus the communism paradigm, dialectic. Then here's the last one, guys. Number 10, propaganda is the executive arm of the invisible government. That's Edward Bernays.
Powerful, powerful. I really want to get a list of these quotes too.
I will probably not right now, but I will make sure I'll
Later.
put all that stuff in that Facebook group, and then
Sounds
I'll make
good.
it to where you can copy and paste it. So anyway, there you have it.
Awesome.
Part two.
That's amazing stuff. Really helping to expand our minds to this reality. Yeah. So Adam, where can people access your information?
I have a basically I created a Facebook group to kind of I'm gonna go store all of this. I'm gonna make an effort to put all this into posts. I'll there's quite a bit there right now, but it's Minds Under Influence. It's a Facebook group, so any of my friends they can. It's free to join. It's an open group. I had to pause the Jungian group for a bit because it's a lot of work and I wasn't seeing a lot of interaction there. And I kind of made a mistake and made it a private group, and I found out my Facebook account's getting sort of shadow banned. So, but Minds Under Influence, and there's quite a bit there. I'll come up with some idea and I create some kind of post for that. But I'll make sure I get all these all these notes that I created, and I'll format them and I'll post them in there. So Minds Under Influence. So anybody that's a Facebook friend, I changed I put my last name there, so it's Adam Perleika at Facebook. Praleika.
Yeah, it's a beautiful name. I like that shit.
Yeah, it is.
Cool.
Yeah.
Caught me off guard.
I had to change it to my
man. Like, I was like, oh, okay, cool.
What's that? Say again?
You caught me off guard when I first saw that, but I was like, yeah, that's what's up.
I had to change it because I'm trying to meet all of my cousins overseas, and well, they would see my name and they don't realize, because I haven't met many of them, so like, I'll have to change my name, and so I figured that might, so Adam Alexander, that's my middle name, but Perleika's the last name, so Praleika.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you're finding another maybe neutral place to store your information as well, like a website.
Hasn't been touched there, too bad. Yeah, hasn't been touched there, so.
Yeah, good.
So anyway, hop on there.
Right.
I'll get all these notes.
I want to thank you for being here and taking your time, and thanks to all our viewers and listeners, people tuning in today live. That's awesome. The comments, and people can access this on our Dissolving the Divide channel and or live on YouTube. And then I imagine, Derek, you'll get it up on our other platforms as well.
Props to Derek and Leslie.
Thank you.
Super amount of work, you guys. Derek and Leslie, obviously your presence always adds 10x to the discussion. And Derek, got to give him props for his hustle, man.
Yeah, working hard and great editing, and
It's like what time is it there, Derek? It's like 3 in the morning.
I can't hear you. You're on mute.
It's only 2:00 in the morning, almost around.
But you've probably been up since like what, 6 o'clock? Man,
when did you sleep last? Is the
I had
question.
a cat nap, but I've recorded, like 5 hours before even getting into this one.
Yeah, man, we gotta let you go to sleep.
Always
Not 4 hours. It doesn't matter. But all I want to say is, in conclusion, like, Adam, you brought so much value to our show and to anyone out there listening. I really hope people take this to mind and to heart, as even, that's the common theme as well. And they're using that against us. And so we really got to take that power back and, really, have that critical thinking in mind. So we're not, duped into, falling into these camps and, falling into the hands of these dubious dialectics that got us so divided, unfortunately. And we see this on a daily basis on social media. And, people want to laugh it up through whatever fucking memery, whatever the fuck. And like, in the end, like, how is that helping out the cause of things in the, like, in the grand scheme of the spectrum, like, you understand, like, the spectrum is being dominated, on all fronts, with that full spectrum dominance, as a Christian commented earlier, so it's like we're in warfare, y'all. Like, let's try to, like, we can all have fun and this and that, but like, let's be more appropriate and mature with these things, and like, pick your time and moments, and classiness of it, I guess. Fuck.
And there's
I was looking for
there's-
yeah, but still love you.
and maintain compassion, because you just need to understand that like this manipulation and deception is coming from a high level. It's coming from people that are experts at this, and we don't just understand that polarization is divide and conquer. It's the same thing. It's a similar thing. It's like just understand that that's what oftentimes the evil influences want. So maybe we look at somebody that I'm not saying that you gotta put up with certain behavior from people. It's better just to move on. But when you allow yourself to be fall into that trap of polarization, and you allow it to influence your actions, your heart, mind, and deeds, again going back to that, then you're just a product of the manipulation. So and just understand that people are even with some of these silly things that we see, it's like, look, they're being manipulated, and so we have to have compassion for those people, and it's not benefiting us when we're just looking down at them, being condescending, being derogatory, and and you can't lead a horse to water. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But at the same time, it's like that's not everybody's job either. It's like do what you can to. We all have especially us in this arena, in this sort of area. Just do what you can to. And I'm a human. I've been victim, and I've just recently I'm starting to approach that where it's like I need to be very conscientious of the hearts, minds, and deeds I influence or take part in and influence. So that's very important.
Great final words. So I think with
Indeed, yeah.
that, we'll
Thanks
say
for putting this together, and thanks for having me. And I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Sure,
We'll
brother.
circle back and do a couple more.
sounds good. Yeah. I
It'd be
think
an honor,
you're a
brother.
useful
Yeah.
regular on our show, I think, because what the work you're doing is really epitomizes the divides, what
Yeah.
creates the divides we're trying to dissolve.
And this is what Derek and I were discussing a couple 2 years ago. It's like if we can just give people, and I was inspired, don't get me wrong, I was inspired by the sort of Rich Grove and talking about
Mhm.
the trivium, and really understanding the grammar of and I just realized that, hey man, if these terms have meanings, we can convey these, we can people can understand them. And it's like just like understand, it's the best metaphor is fallacy. Like once you learn that list of fallacy, like there's and there's there's so many different ways to deceive people, but it's all deception. It's just degrees of deception. It's on a spectrum, but it's all the same thing. It's like it's really just deception. That's all we're talking about. Manipulate. So
Yeah.
once you understand the nomenclature and the grammar, once you understand. So anyway.
Yeah, when you see it, it has less power over you. So
Yeah, absolutely. Because
Yeah.
it's like the monster in the closet. It's like, no, it's
That's
shadow.
right. It's not so scary when you can see through it. Yeah, for what it is.
Absolutely.
All right. Well,
Okay, guys. Thanks a lot.
time to say
Appreciate
good
it.
night. Thank you. Thank
Bon
y'all.
appetit. Much love, yo. Respect.
Bye. I know I
What
gotta
to
go
do?
eat too. I
A
haven't eaten.
bientôt.
Right on. Cheers.
Adios.
Yeah, ciao.